Okay, I guess we have a quorum, so we'll start. Welcome to the XCAP meeting. We are going to have Chantal can call the roll for us. Larry should be here shortly, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and Ed will also be down shortly. In the corner. All right, Greg Braille. Phil Burton. Here. Tony Carrasco. In Young Cho. Megan Kane. Larry Klein is en route. Judy Kleinberg is excused. Patricia Lau. Here. Adina Levin. Nadia Nayak. Here. Keith Reckdahl. Here. David Shin. Here. And Carrie Templeton. Here. You have a quorum present.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item is number 2, oral communications. Do I have a show of hands? Anyone wants to speak during oral communications? I got 1, I got 2. Okay, great. You can have 2 minutes each. Michael, special thanks again for all the animations. I think you were hired 9 times over last night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Why? Okay, thanks. First of all, I want to thank the XCAP committee for presenting those ideas and getting them approved, what I think are the reasonable ones to get approved to focus on. That's the first thing I want to say thank you. And that thanks also comes from receiving a call at 10 o'clock at night from Nadia and Keith about, can you answer some questions? We're trying to put this presentation together, which I gladly did. The other thing, though, is I want to express a little bit of a concern, or I mean, maybe I don't have this right, but my understanding for the XCAP committee is that it represents the community and that it's going to take ideas to the city council. But when one member gets up and says, hey, I'm against or for a particular position, the optics aren't good there. And it makes me wonder how objective the committee is when members speak up like that. It's about optics. I'm not suggesting they can't express their opinion, but that has to be clearly, I think, divided from the committee, much like the Mayor Fine letter got sort of rumbled up there. So I just wanted to express that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next. And if we have anyone else, you can line up behind Ms. Jordan.
Yes, I agree with Michael. I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to also recognize that, well, noted the comments, or the quote, I guess, from Nadia in the post today, saying that all the options stink, and I'd just like to say that I would agree with that. I think it's a good quote. I don't mean to disparage in any way. I think that's true. And I, again, as Michael said, thank you, sympathize that the options do stink, and you're spending a lot of time and effort on this and hearing a lot from folks. And it certainly does. I mean, I certainly, of course, think that closing Churchill stinks. And it certainly also stinks when you don't know what's going to happen with Palo Alto Avenue, to try to make a decision about something or to be giving recommendations about something when you don't have insider visibility into some other, possible grade crossing closure that could affect recommendations that you're making. So I just wanted to note that and highlight that. And secondly, again, bring up that the narrative that's been put forth about electrification leading to more frequent trains happening is not actually accurate. It's dependent upon other limiting factors, such as the expensive grade separations. It's also related to tracking, switching, other things, not just electrification, which assists but is not sufficient to enable more frequent train. We've been told that narrative, which then says that will lead to more traffic congestion, which leads to we need to do expensive grade separations, when in fact it's the other way around. We cannot do faster trains, which would lead to more frequent trains, without expensive grade separations, which leads to we don't necessarily have to do them, and we don't necessarily have to pay for them. And the elephant in the room is high-speed rail, and the money that can be tapped via high-speed rail and this great rush to make a decision so that a possible business tax could be passed to assist with the financing. Oh, that's my time. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Do we have anyone, oh, go ahead, Mr. Levesky.
Yeah, this is Rob Levitsky. Usually I come up here and tell you that Churchill needs to stay open. And I think we found a good solution for it with Mike Price's design. And I went out to Churchill in the morning and the evenings, the rush hour times, to see what the traffic counts were and what limitations there would be from his design on the traffic. And it turns out that most of the turns that people are doing will be accommodated by his design. In the morning, the backup is coming north on Alma and trying to turn left to get out towards El Camino. Yeah, there was 255 cars yesterday morning and between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning. And his design will actually probably increase the capacity of getting through that, because what happens now is the cars queue up and they're going to do about 16 at a time for each cycle of green on a left turn. And what happens is sometimes that gets interrupted by a train, and then the whole cycle just backs up because the left turn is not prioritized in the reset once the train's gone by. The pathway that doesn't work so well is the going straight across, and it turns out there's it's a minority of cars, maybe 15 or 20% that actually need to go across. And so I just wanted to congratulate Mike and say that I think, at least from a traffic standpoint, it would probably work.
Next.
Carrie Yarkin, 135 Churchill. Actually, as I was driving here, I was thinking a lot about how we're missing the Pali traffic engineer, or the person who's going to look at Pali, because Pali is bounded by Embarcadero, Alma, El Camino, and Churchill. And Churchill, the way I look at it, is that it's very unsafe. I'm trying to get the number of accidents, or 209 accidents in a 10-year span or 15-year span on Churchill. It should be the main access, the way I look at it, for bicycles and pedestrians into Pali, because Embarcadero should not be a main entrance for bikes or pedestrians. It's always going to have a lot more traffic. It's much more heavily traveled, and there just isn't that kind of access way for bikes. If you look at the number of bikes, they've been increasing every year, and that I think as a forward-thinking city, Palo Alto should put the priority of the bicycles and the pedestrians into the high school at Churchill. They should close Churchill, have a beautiful entrance into Pali for all the bikes and the pedestrians. One thing unique about Palo Alto is most children and high school students ride their bikes to school. We should enhance that, make it even better. We should look at, won't that be great that all these high school students will not be driving cars? They're setting their habits at that time. I think that should be our forward thinking, and I also think you should think about, we're trying to improve transit with all the trains. We should be in favor of that, and we should be in favor of making our city, forward thinking and not going back and giving the priority to the cars that are always going to be there. I mean, we should be trying to improve access to bicycles and pedestrians and really make that our main goal. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who wants to comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. We're going to now give an update of how the city council meeting went back and what feedback we got. So the meeting ended late. I didn't get home until about 10:30, 11, so I was hoping to try to write something up and rewatch the video, but I failed. So I would encourage you guys to watch the video. I think Chantal said it gets posted 3 days usually after. Okay, so you can look. Yeah, I usually see it first posted on the YouTube channel that the city has, and then it comes out on the city council webpage, but that's just my own thing. If you have not read the papers, good. I will just tell you. So I think I was trying to quote the neighbor from Southgate who said that it sucked, and instead I said it stinks because I didn't want to say it sucks in a council meeting, but it was explaining why we were looking at why we were trying to improve the alternatives, not that the ones that we were recommending stink. Just to be clear. Oh, the video's up. Okay, great. So everyone can watch it. That can be everyone's homework instead of me trying to summarize what each of them said. But of the ideas, two of the ideas move forward. So the constant flow underpass for South Palo Alto went forth 7-0 vote, as well as the Churchill partial underpass, Mike Price's idea as a 7-0 vote. And there was a lot of interest in Tony's concept, but it did not pass at this time. But people were sort of like, oh, interesting, but they sort of were not there. Also a 7-0 vote, yeah. So they kept it lucky sevens. Thank you for pointing that out. It was a 7-0 against. Yes, Carrie.
I kind of read that as it's not as tightly related to railroad, and that's why they do want to consider it just in a different capacity. Is that how you understood it?
Yeah, there was, I mean, I
Right.
think it's open to interpretation. I mean, I want to be careful not to just give everyone what I thought was the read, so I want to encourage everyone to watch it, but I think various people thought different things. There was a moment of confusion because Keith and I tried to give a name to each of them so we could, because some people were saying, we don't want it to be Elizabeth's idea or Mike's idea or Tony's idea, right? They should have like maybe a name that describes what it is. So we named that one Rethink Embarcadero, and in retrospect, that made them think that they had new ideas about Embarcadero and didn't appreciate that it was about the Embarcadero concept and not the road itself. And so there was a bit of discussion about that. But I think overall, obviously there were concerns about what are the limitations, what is AECom going to come back with. There's definitely warts on these, as we all know. But as XCAP, they also felt that there was enough there that they wanted to pursue it further. And so I don't know, Ed, if you wanted to speak a little bit about the time forecast that you gave. I think you said a few months, like whatever your. I thought you said that it would be a few months to be able to get the things turned around in terms of AECom. Did we give a number for that?
We're going to work with AECom and with the XCAP to determine next steps.
Okay, but we don't have a timeline of when that comes back.
Correct.
Okay.
Because we need to assess the scope and budget impacts of how that work proceeds. That said, there was some discussion about the work plan for the XCAP, and as we proceed today, I would like to get a better handle on what that looks like so that we can feed that back to AECom as well, so that.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously,
All these
because whenever
out there.
council meets, they come up with new alternatives, and this time it's our fault. But now there's two more, so we
Right.
can't really seriously discuss either Churchill or South Palo Alto until we get the AECom take on each one,
Right.
in
and-
my opinion.
So there was a potential motion on the table where the council had asked if XCAP could, since we're adding two new alternatives, could we remove some? And I pushed back solely from I don't have time in the schedule for us to even deliberate on removing some and then having to then go through the process again of just making final recommendations because of the number of meetings that we have out. So not pushing back on the idea that we couldn't possibly remove some. It's just that in order to do that, it would chew up a couple of cycles of where are we in the schedule, and I'm trying to keep the timeline tight. It's also not, as you heard from Ed, they have to come back to council to tell council how much it costs to study. Well, they gave them an estimate of how much it costs, but how much the scope will be, when the contract amendment will be. And then once that happens, then they go do the work and then they come back. So we don't know yet when we would receive that work back. There's obviously an understanding that it will have an impact on our timeline, but we don't know what that is yet. So we kind of have to keep going as if it could arrive any day and then get to where we can get to.
I also like to add, I watched this thing on television, which is not the same thing as actually sitting there. Well, but I have to also say Larry Klein really helped out with his advice to the council at the end in terms of, you guys are gonna screw all this up if you just rush this thing. I thought, well, my words, not his, to be clear, and the Post is not here to quote me. But I thought it was very helpful. I think that kind of nailed the issue at the end.
Keith, did you want to say anything else that you felt was a part of the update?
I don't have any wisdom to share.
Okay, sounds good. Ed, you have wisdom?
Well, I don't know about that. So, well, just whenever you're ready to move forward, I think the discussion of how the next steps will proceed for the XCAP is really relevant because, as we talked a little bit at the end of last night and perhaps now, is it the XCAP perspective that you cannot move forward with the 7 alternative or the evaluation of the 7 alternatives until you've got the AECom results on the additional 2. If that's correct, then we may be dead in the water until that work is complete, as opposed to, we'll say the other approach, which is applying the criteria that exists to the other 7 to the extent that you can, and then apply those criteria to the additional 2 when that information's available. So I'm curious, the approach, and this feeds back to the question of the work plan. What is the plan for how the meetings and your discussions will proceed over the course of the next, let's say, couple of months?
So what we could probably do is agendize the work plan so we can have a legit discussion on it, because it's not agendized for us to have that conversation really today, but I can lay out for you at least at a high level what I've gone through with Larry and with Chantal, which is, so we have Caltrain coming to the next meeting. We have Norm Mattioni coming to the meeting after that, and then we've got the traffic consultant coming to the meeting after that. So at least for the next 3 meetings, that's kind of, those are the biggest items on the agenda. The rest is sort of as we're getting through. There will be a point where we discuss the criteria, and so for the XCAP members, I did let the council know that we have one more check-in before our final due date would have been. And, you know, the motion on the table had been, could we eliminate alternatives before then? And I didn't think we could make that timeline. But I did warn them that we may have questions about criteria because the criteria were crafted in September of 2017 when, for example, the closure of Churchill was not one of the alternatives that seemed to be so in the lead, shall we say? And so there's criteria that are more difficult to apply to the closure than it is to a new or a different type of treatment. And so that was my kind of feeling on that. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on what that is, or in terms of agendizing this for future discussion, do we have any?
I suspect that we're gonna have to really struggle at first to figure out what the process is, so we may as well get started.
Yep.
Just to start the struggle.
Yep.
So we'll learn something from we'll learn something from doing the process.
Yeah, I almost feel like we should do a little bit of, I hate to say the word ranking of the existing alternatives. And find out how far apart we really are.
But let's keep that very tightly held in here, seriously.
Well, it's a public meeting, so.
All right, I take back what I just said.
Well,
Let
so
us not
I
try to publicize this further.
I think it's worth trying to agendize this for our next meeting, so maybe we could agree to what the process is, but we can't really do it the way this is agendized, and I want to be careful that we don't get ourselves into trouble. But I hear what you're saying, and in my mind, that it was the latter of the 2 scenarios that you pointed out, meaning we would attempt to apply the criteria that we have to what we have while we wait for the other stuff. But obviously, I need to make sure that the group agrees, because we are trying to kind of make sure that everyone agrees to what the process is, so. Keith?
I mean, one thing that I would want to do some thinking about is these public meetings. What do we want to get out of that? Is there anything that we want to get out of it? And how do we
Or
plan?
do you mean the town hall
The
meetings?
town hall meetings, yeah. And is there anything that we should be doing ahead of time to think about questions that we would want the public to answer? And also then how would we digest the results of that? Are we just gonna go listen and that's it? Or is there gonna be some action or something where we can incorporate their thoughts?
So Larry and I have not had any real communications with the communications team about how that's going. That's kind of being run from Megan's perspective. So I don't know if Ed or Chantal, you want to speak to how that would go.
Yeah, I think at the last meeting I gave kind of an overview of the more or less format. So the people that are working on the content of those town halls are actually the 3 of us at the table. So you have a good audience to discuss that with. We're keeping Megan in the loop, obviously, but on the subject matter of the meetings, I think that we're shaping it. I'm looking to Ed to make sure that.
Well, I think it's an interesting topic for the XCAP to discuss, because quite frankly, community support is not one of your criteria. And so I think you could take the perspective that either it's heavily dependent on the feedback you get from residents at the town halls, or it's completely independent of the input you get from residents at the town halls. I think the XCAP's collective wisdom on that, I think, is a good subject for discussion on how do you want to factor it in.
Just the initial point that we'll have to struggle with.
I have a slightly different question about the downtown portion of the plan. When will that, yeah. I gave you, I've asked it for 4 months, so you probably have some answer. So the question is, it impacts, as one resident said, it impacts the whole process in some way, and the solution. So, the question again.
Okay, so hopefully I give the same answer, which, well, on the one hand, just the factual piece, which is we have not proceeded with initiating the work on Palo Alto Avenue. You know, we are talking with Stanford and other entities that are interested in how to scope it. But again, the work itself has not started in earnest. The plan has been to initiate that work after the conclusion of the review of the existing crossings. And so let me take a next step, which is understanding the concern that you've raised, Tony, and others have echoed. I think there's a premise, for lack of a better term, I'll use the term premise, that exists on two sides. One is, as you've heard me say before, I do not see us as staff advancing any recommendation to close Palo Alto Avenue. That the impact, both from a traffic congestion as well as access to both downtown Palo Alto and whether it be Menlo Park and beyond, would be so significant to that while we need to study it as among the range of alternatives, I don't see that being advanced. And so from that premise on my side, I think the my expectation is that the alternatives we'll be advancing will be ones that mitigate or avoid any spillover of traffic from Palo Alto Avenue to, whether it be down to Embarcadero or Churchill. And so that would be the point of any future alternatives analysis of options related to Palo Alto Avenue. So that's the premise from which I say that it's out of scope and that is something that we should park and hold me to that conclusion. Again, the premise that if I'm wrong and if down the road the evaluation of Palo Alto Avenue says we got to close it, and then that does create a traffic impact to Embarcadero, to Churchill, or what have you, then all bets are off on, you know, the work that we have ongoing. But I don't, quite frankly, see that happening. So that's again, personal opinion and also a statement of fact, if you can parse those pieces.
Are Stanford or any other entities interested in what's happening at Embarcadero Churchill? Especially Stanford is what I'm thinking about.
I can't speak for Stanford. Where was your question headed?
So what I'm saying is they're clearly interested in something that's happening in the north discussion that we're not a part of. But have you received any feedback, or do we have any feedback that we should be thinking about related to Stanford that might have impacts on the Churchill and Embarcadero discussion that we're having?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And
again, I would assume they're interested, but they haven't.
Okay, but
expressed
if they're
perspective.
chatting with you about one subject and they had a really strong feeling about the other one that leads into the same conversation, I would hope that they would say something. I'm not going to hold you to that.
Stanford's interest is around access to the transit center, and ensuring that is both currently and in the future maintained. And I think we all share that priority.
So second, is it fair to say, however, that even though staff might not consider advancing an alternative where Palo Alto Avenue might be closed, you could potentially have council decide to make that, and that could in some ways blow up. I mean, that's sort of, I think, some of the concern that you've heard from the committee is that we hear that that's not what staff thinks, but what if that's what gets thrown back?
Again, you never presuppose a range of options that could happen. I don't see it. I don't see that as a likely outcome.
So you are presupposing, but we're not supposed to.
No, I'm
I mean,
saying
that's what you're
I don't see it. I do not expect that will be a conclusion that the council would reach. Again, out of the same recognition of the potential traffic or the likely traffic impacts.
Okay.
Generic question about traffic. For example, Embarcadero and El Camino, just for example. Does Stanford give us any opinions on what we should do? Or do they just like, it's your problem, you deal with it? How active is that interface?
Well, I think we can and do talk to them on an ongoing basis when there are proposals moving forward. And again, I don't know of any recent discussions.
Question, I know Palo Alto Avenue, in your opinion, should not be closed, it's also in mine, but how will it be open? How will it be kept open is a big question.
That's the essence of the work ahead, right? What design options, not unlike things we're doing here, would work.
On the topic of the council meeting last night and sort of how it was reported in the press, and relating to the community conversations that are upcoming, I'm wondering what the plan is to communicate this need for acquisitions in quite a few of the options, or at least easements or that kind of thing, because the way it was reported didn't seem to match with what I heard last night, and I want to make sure that we're communicating correctly about property impacts.
I think to date, what we've done for each of the alternatives that have been discussed is to be able to describe in as much specificity as currently exists where property acquisition is necessary. So, for example, the tunnel and trench options that you've seen had pretty significant property acquisition requirements. So as we get to that same level of definition for the new ideas, then we would do the same.
Anybody else?
I do have a question about these meetings, and I was wondering what our role truly is. Are we there to help answer questions? Of course, the outreach piece is important. I will express it to the groups that I'm familiar with. But again, when we're in these meetings, I had planned to attend, especially the Meadow Charleston one. But again, do you want us to have information, or are we there to observe and take notes regarding feedback? What do you expect from us?
I think that's a two-way conversation that we should have as to the role and goals from the XCAS perspective. See my earlier comment, depends on how those town halls in particular, if we focus on those, how you see that factoring into your recommendations. Do you want to be swayed by community perspectives, or if you look at the criteria, do you want to be, let's say, somewhat firewalled from what those perspectives are? Because our goal with the town halls is to get more awareness of the projects and the options and to solicit that feedback. Ultimately, it certainly will affect the council's decisions, or at least considered by the council in making their decisions. And so the question is, how do you want that to factor into your recommendations?
So I'd like to observe that some of the criteria are necessarily subjective and judgmental, and how significant an impact is. Let's say viaduct, visual impact of viaduct. Is it moderately important or extremely important? I can't gauge that unless I listen to community feedback, and I have to, I believe, represent community feedback. That's my contribution to this discussion.
Yeah.
I think the way Larry and I have been managing this is that the XCAP was formed because we each bring to the table the values of the community as best as we can represent it, and we're not going to represent everybody perfectly, and there's going to be biases, but that is exactly how the community is as well. And so since the town hall meetings are being done through the communications team of the city, that while we could certainly receive reports back of maybe groups of feedback like Eileen Goodwin was doing previously of kind of big bulleted things, that ultimately we are supposed to make the decisions because we are the ones that are deepest into what we know. And those, not the decisions, excuse me, the recommendations. The recommendations we will make are because we've spent the most time listening to these things, and we've been hearing the feedback, and we will get whatever the report back from the town halls would be. And so that's what I was expecting that we would do, that we would continue to hear those, but that we would stay laser focused on our weekly meetings of what we're doing, because it's a lot already. I'm already hearing, the cries for help in terms of the schedule, and so I don't want to add to that we have to attend all of these meetings and be kind of balancing all that. And so,
To be selective, especially for.
sorry, use your mic.
For specific concerns such as safety, I would really like to hear the community's feedback. And again, you know, as you said, there are biases, but my role, I hope, is to be objective and to listen to their concerns.
So maybe what we can do is agendize for after, I have to look, Chantal, at what we wrote for the next week's meeting with Sebastian, because we tried to keep it light, so that, I'll get to you in 1 second, Carrie. But I want to be sure that if there's specific topics, like what Phil was saying about visual implementations or maybe safety, maybe what we can do is highlight areas where we'd like more community feedback, and we can give those to the team so that when they do their town hall meetings, they can think about how to solicit.
I also think this is up to sort of, what's our scope as an XCAP, right?
So
Like,
it's not the town hall.
let's say that it's the Mike Price answer, which may or may not be what we end up recommending, right? And which have, sorry, I don't know the name of it. Specifically, how long is the left turn lane, and what color is the wall, and does it go this way or that way, and how is the bridge designed, and how thick is it? For that sort of thing, I would imagine that you would want an actual design charrette with the actual people in that neighborhood to say, look, this is what the council has decided to do. We can't possibly make all the details right. You know, should the bike underpass go this way or that way? For that, I would expect that it's out of the purview of the XCAP and that the community should be involved. And I think our role as the XCAP is to be a little bit more abstract and say, we've looked at all these hard decisions, at all these choices, whether they stink or not, and we decided that this one stinks the least, and it's our preferred alternative, but there are some unanswered questions about it, and we think that the people who actually live near this project should be the ones to contribute more heavily to that. That's just my opinion. So we just have to be careful as an XCAP when we get into these meetings and we're getting into really, really deep details on exactly the design of something. I think we're going a little bit too far than the community needs us to.
I'm just thinking about how our presentation went last night and how some of these conversations can go. And I want to be really, I want to encourage those that do participate in the community conversations to really focus on listening and not use this as a moment of persuasion. This is, we do come with our biases, like you mentioned, and our favorites and our pet projects. But really what we need to do at these meetings is listen. And then once we've assembled all of the information and the input, then we can start to work on persuasion, or, you know, I like this one, well, I like this one, and selling each other on it as we work towards a recommendation. But I would be cautious about, saying things that might be triggering sensitivities, like I don't remember who mentioned something about the takes, right, and the property takes. That term is super loaded in our community, and it has so many different meanings that as professionals, you know, we understand that it could be any number of things, but as a community member might hear it in a very different way and think that means they're going to lose their home or something like that. So I would be really thoughtful about focusing on listening and being careful with our word choices in such a way that we set people up to really be open to the alternatives that we're considering.
Okay, I will, again, recommend that everyone go through the videos. Each of the council members, some of them gave thoughts on, well, I'd like to see a different bike lane here, and I've liked this other idea. I realized I didn't bring my copy of the chicken scratch notes that I took while they were speaking. Oh, actually, maybe I have it. Allison Cormack rattled off a helpful list of things that she was recommending in terms of what could be included in a final report, and it was basically, the high-level message was, think of our report as a record of decision, so that any resident who had no idea what we were talking about could pick it up and understand, okay, what was the problem, what were the methods to measure the problem, what are the pros and cons of the alternatives that we looked at, what were the recommendations, what mitigations are possible, and in appendices showing all of the things that we used to support what we did. And so that might be, that was her suggestion in terms of how to lay this out. So as we continue to use it and we work on the schedule, I'm trying to focus on making sure that we've got all the things. And that was sort of the point of the exercise last week, of understanding what are the sticking points for the group. And so If as this keeps going, there's some topic that suddenly comes up and you really start to realize that that's going to be the difference between you being able to pick with broad brush strokes between one thing and the other, please let me know, because that will help me as we go forward and agendize these things. And so I hear you, Ed, we will try to agendize a process conversation so we can have that discussion. And then conversation on, remind me, Chantal, I'm looking at you, on the town hall and what might be the best, other, us giving you specific topics that we'd like to hear about in the town hall, or hearing the report back so we can make sure that we include that. That works for everybody. Okay, anybody else? So do we have any public comment about the city council meeting last night, or the update from the city council meeting? Okay, seeing none, I appreciate being fast on this. Okay, the next one is XCAP member update and working group updates. I'm sad that Adina's not here because I know that she had a Caltrain update. I can give a little bit of one in the end, but why don't we go around? Do we have any from the different groups? Pat, I think you wanted to speak a little bit about safety, right?
I wanted to mention that Nadia and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago about safety and Caltrain's perspective. And since Sebastian Petty is coming next week, it was recommended that Rob Scarpino, who is the safety expert, he's also the deputy director for infrastructure, so he will not be invited because we have Sebastian coming next week. So I will send an email to both Ken Duker, who is with the city, as well as Mr. Scarpino, to let them know we appreciate any input, but they will not be invited to speak.
I'm sorry, I had to doing something with Chantal for a second. So I just wanted to reiterate, the main thing is whether or not it makes sense to take up committee time to discuss safety things, where unless there's any objection, we probably all want it to be very safe. And so unless there is a big difference that the committee sees between one alternative and the other, that from a safety perspective, we would need to bring in a safety expert, we're going to assume that we want to build these things in a safe way. And we will not use meeting time to sort of have someone come and speak to us about safety, because I'm assuming we all assume we want it to be safe. So that was sort of the understanding there. Greg?
Does anybody want it to be not safe?
No, but the levels of safety.
Exactly. I think, it's trivializing the conversation, right, of how many nines of safetiness are we going to have, right? So.
Sorry, I don't mean to trivialize. What I meant is, I don't think there's anything at this stage of design that we could say that has to be included, because anything, if we vote for a trench or we vote for a viaduct, they will go and study that for years and come back with all of the safety features. At that time is a better time to have a specific conversation about designs and safety issues. But we can't have it at this level at this time because it's not granular enough. That's what I meant to say.
Thank you for clarifying. That makes sense.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. I was a little too.
So I hope that when we get to working on the report, I don't know if the report needs to include any why we are doing this. But I think that safety is one of the reasons why we're doing this. And it's something that many of the comments I've heard from the public, for instance, seem to not be cognizant of how many grade crossing accidents we have in Palo Alto that are not suicides, and are even include injuries and sometimes deaths. And I'm happy to share that data. But in general, what I would like to ask, since I'm responsible for safety and also the creeks, is there anything that anyone else on the XCAP would like to know on either of those topics that we can go off and research? So for instance, on creeks, we're never going to get a direct, definitive yes and no answer on, is it okay to put a trench or tunnel here where the creek is or not? So we're going to have to use our judgment on that. But is there anything that we should be researching? Because right now, I don't think there's anything that we're looking into.
That makes me wonder whether we shouldn't start, I don't know whether this is possible under the Brown Act, but start some sort of online folder where we can start compiling these things, like the reports that you have, as part to be part of the appendices of a report at some point. Because there are tons of the traffic flow at Palo Alto Ave. I can't remember. I know we knew it at some point a year ago, but now I don't know. And so some way that we can sort of compile all those reports and those pieces of data for future reference. If anyone has ideas.
I'm looking at Chantal, who's got
It's not a Brown Act issue, it's a library, and it would be good for you guys to put that in there. Just don't use that to talk amongst yourselves about all the stuff.
Does it need to be publicly readable?
I don't know.
So
Okay.
we can certainly do that on a Google Drive. So I have a Google Drive that Card pays for that is actually just me paying for it. But there's lots of space on it, so I'm happy to put out, and it can be a link to the public. All it would include, so to caution what Chantal is saying, it can include reports and articles and what have you. It cannot include someone writing an open letter to the rest of the ex-cappers saying, and I want this and I want that. Like, it can't be communications between us, but it certainly can just be a repository for important documents and things that we think are important, sort of as like an early appendices that we could then like cull through at the end and
So it's
decide.
like entering something into the congressional record.
Yes, sure,
Okay.
if we want to make it sound super official.
But I'd like to ask you a question. I know I'm being provocative. Are you committing to continuing paying for that Google Drive for some number of years?
Yeah, I already have. For a whole bunch of other reasons, I already have. But it would be eventually transferred, once it's printed into that could be where we collect the documents, but once we make a final decision for documents, it would become part of the public record and be in the eventual report. So even if I get hit by the proverbial train later and can't get stuff done,
And
right,
your
then.
estate doesn't continue funding this?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
All right.
It's not very expensive, I have a lot of documents.
One other issue on safety, when we design buildings, we have a term called legibility, which is understanding where you are and how you're going to get from one place to another. And that legibility, the clearer it is about where you're going, makes it safer, both walking as well as driving.
Tony, write that on a piece of paper, and in 2 years, when the reports come out, we're going to have that conversation, because that's about when it's going to be.
I think Tony's comment is very important. It's
Yeah.
almost like program evaluation. You're looking at what you want to achieve, and then you're working toward that, and then you evaluate it. And unfortunately, I don't think it is a given as far as safety is concerned. And when Ed and I worked on this issue many years ago, after the clusters occurred, where people took their own lives, it was really sad that we were reactionary. We were looking at fencing, we were looking at track watch guards and then cameras. And so, as I said, I think we need to integrate it into the plan, and it's got to be a priority. So thank you for the concern.
I'll just end in a second, but in general, my question is, if anyone else on the XCAP has questions in any of these topics and would like research to be done, please let us know.
Anybody else from the different working groups? How are we doing on the traffic group? I know there's been limited.
Because we sort of have been discussing it in the whole group, we did at the time before last meeting. And then this time people turned in questions. The traffic group hasn't sort of had work that's been separate from the group in its entirety.
Okay. And same with the Caltrain group, basically. We passed out to you guys last time the early questions that we sent to Sebastian. Obviously, we'll review with Sebastian when he's here what other questions there were. But that's basically what that group's been up to. I did want to give one update. I unfortunately don't have the link, but I will send it to Chantal afterwards. Caltrain has their latest update, and they are floating a plan now which shows 8 trains an hour operating by 2027. So each direction. So yes, thank you. Yes, so 8 trains per hour in each direction. So we've been operating it, just as a reminder for the public who might be watching. We currently have about 5 trains an hour at peak hour. Once we're electrifying, we're expecting to have 6 trains an hour at peak hour. And Caltrain's newest plans are now showing 8 trains an hour at peak hour per direction. They also include high-speed rail trains in their plans. I will try not to laugh, but there's 4 trains on top of that. So it is even if you discount high-speed rail, we're still looking at an increase. And so I will send around the document so you guys can see it with your own eyes. And it might be good for you guys to review the presentation before Sebastian presents next week. Yes.
Is it possible for the, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Carrie, I had Carrie and then I'll
okay.
go to you, Greg.
Is the high-speed rail being considered in this region on the peninsula?
Yes, it is. So high-speed rail is, as far as high-speed rail is concerned, would be going from Bakersfield all the way to San Francisco. But they have a timeline that I would say is more than ambitious. Not to mention the funding, yeah. Greg, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, is, a questioner has spoken at the last 3 XCAP meetings to the effect that Caltrain cannot increase the number of trains per hour until there are grade separations. Can we find out if that is true?
I can tell you categorically it is not true. Now, there is some upper limit because of speeds, but the notion that Caltrain has to electrify is, I'll just say it's incorrect.
A grade separation in particular?
No, even without grade separation. If you want to know what the real limitation is on Caltrain frequencies, it's station dwell time. Station dwell time means when a train stops to load and unload passengers. That time to clear that spot, plus the time to accelerate and decelerate, that regulates track occupancy. Now, with electrified trains, there'll be less time needed to decelerate and accelerate. But dwell times probably won't change that much. Maybe with high platforms, you could speed loading and unloading. That's the limitation on frequency. That plus enough available equipment.
So I just wanted to make it really super clear. There is no federal regulation or FRA or anything like that.
There
It
is. So it's 100, they have to, if you go more than 125 miles an hour, then you need a grade separation. So, but high-speed rail, if it came on the peninsula, and Caltrain will not operate at more than 125 miles an hour. In fact, they go 79 miles an hour right now.
Right now it's 79,
They go
to be clear,
110, the
yes.
design speed is 125. None of those inherently, because of speed, require grade separations.
But to further make my point, if you look at something like London or New York's transit systems, they run 30 or 36 trains per hour per track on heavily loaded lines. And the limitation is the dwell time at the busiest train stations.
But the dwell time doesn't impact grade separations. The question
No,
is.
but
I'm just trying to make it super duper clear, because we heard
grade
3 times from the
separation
same
is
person.
simply a point
Okay.
on the track. The train's allowed to move at a certain speed, whether or not there's a grade separation.
Right, but he's responding to the.
Yeah, but that determines total time between stations and total runtime of a train round trip to San Francisco, San Jose. Those are the factors. Those are the operating factors.
I just want to add on to what Phil said. He mentioned the at-level boarding would speed up the dwell time, also lengthening the trains, which is something they're also talking about.
Right, yeah. So I will get that out to XCAP members so you guys can read the presentation. I
Does
think
this 8-train plan assume that the downtown extension is complete by then?
I didn't look that closely because it's been one heck of a week, but we'll have the link and we can all read it before next
Thank you.
week.
Nadia, is it,
2027.
is it
And I'm
six-
sorry, we should all know, but how many trains per hour are there now?
There's 5 trains per hour
Okay.
now.
In each direction.
So it's 10 total. It's 10 total, 5 in each direction at peak hour.
Okay.
When we electrify, we move to 12 trains an hour total, 6 per
6 in
direction
each
during
direction
peak
per
hour.
hour.
And this is a document making reference to 8 trains per hour per direction at peak hour. So total of 16 trains. So
Okay.
from 12 to 16 by 2027.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I don't remember what our timeline that you had given us a great graphic that shows like if we start now and then you start construction when things would start, but how does that play?
I think it was somewhere around 27, 28 in terms of completion. But, it was an aggregate and obviously a lot more detail to that. And Nadia, just curious on the report that you're referring to, which report is this?
The Caltrain gave an update, I think it's at their last board meeting.
Okay, there's a new packet, and it's probably the same material that they just put together for the local policymaker
I
group that
think it
meets
is the
tomorrow.
same. I think it's
Okay.
just a repeat of what was given to the board, but
Good,
I'll look and
good,
make sure we give
okay.
the best one.
Just make sure we're clear on what the latest
Philip, I
report
think you
is.
had a copy of the presentation, right? Did you look at it in more detail? Do you recall if Trans Bay was in there?
No, I didn't have that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I didn't have that. I had the presentation on the second,
Oh, Dumbarton.
the Dumbarton Bridge.
Okay.
Nadia, is
Pardon
the-
me.
Is the traffic model going to use the 16 trains per hour, or?
We'll talk
How is
about
that gonna
traffic
happen?
when we have our traffic meeting, because I don't really know.
Pardon my ignorance. Does Caltrain have positive train control?
that's part of what's being installed as part of electrification. So part of what's able to have
So
it,
they
have
can
them run
then
a better
shorten the,
schedule.
shorten the spacings between the trains.
Yes.
And so then that would really ramp it up.
Positive train control is necessary for electrification. So there's actually a separate
Oh.
project called CBOS, which is their signaling system. It's the communications-based overlay system. I forget what the other S is, and that's what that is. So
Okay,
there's
so
actually
then
two parts to
if you have to do that for electrification, electrification then effectively shortens the time between, can shorten the time between trains and it'll ramp up.
Positive train control is a requirement for all U.S. railroads. It's been delayed, the effective date's been delayed several times. But again, they're doing it as part of electrification because it makes sense to, but they would have had to do it even for no electrification plans at all.
It's a federal
Do we have, I'm gonna go to the public comment, and then if you guys think of anything else. So do we have any members of the public who wanted to comment on the member updates or working group updates? Okay, seeing none. I know Ed has to leave by 6, so it's good that we got to this topic. So the next one is number 5, which is the list of questions and review the staff responses related to measurable criteria that we have. So you should have in front of you. Oh, you should have in front of you soon? Okay.
I gave it to you last week.
Yes, okay. Chantal gave for us last week some responses. Maybe we'll get, can we get another one now? Okay, another one will be coming off the presses soon. So this was the responses to some of the questions that we had. And then, yeah, we're supposed to, what we're doing is going question by question to verify which ones we want to keep to go forward. Sure, go ahead.
So what I was telling Nadia is I will print out the staff responses again to the measurable criteria. We passed that out last week, so I will just reshare it today. But what's in front of you in the multicolorful document is your list of questions that we've been talking about for the last couple of meetings. I crossed off the ones that you as a group collectively deleted on January 8th. Those are crossed off in the traffic section in red because you voted to agree that those should be taken off. And then offline, I've received either proposed deletions or proposed new questions to go on the list. So the ones that are crossed off in blue are proposed deletions, and the ones that are in green are suggestions for new questions or new iterations of a question. Last time when you all met, Larry recommended that you again vote as a group that this is the list of questions that you'll be working off of. So that's why I wanted to make sure it was really clear of what was new, what was taken off, et cetera.
So the way we'll do this is we'll just go through question by question. What was that? Oh, okay. We'll go through question by question and just make sure that we all agree that these are the questions to move forward. Chantal, the ones you said, sorry, the ones in blue are proposed for deletion already, so I'm just gonna read the ones in black or green, assuming that, because we already moved on the blue ones, yes.
You have not already moved on the blue ones.
Okay, well, we went through it, but we didn't officially do.
Someone has recommended.
Okay, that's.
No one fought for that question to stay.
Okay, thank you. So blue means nobody fought for the question to stay, yes? Okay. Unless we have anybody arguing for number 1, I'm gonna assume we're deleting it. Yes? Okay, so number 2, what is the latest thinking on how to integrate downtown plan areas on ongoing rail plans? So I know that we just had this conversation with Ed. Well, so I will say, yeah. So I will just say, from my perspective, this list of questions are things that will mean that things have to get written down. And so while we've heard it many times from Ed, and thank you for continuing to repeat it, we will ask you to write it out so that we can have it in the appendix later, because I think it's a question that will continue to come up repeatedly. And I think it ought to be kept. So that's, does anybody disagree with me? And please, I'm just gonna read through these, but if anybody isn't happy, please feel free to interrupt. Let's try to do this as open as possible. I don't wanna be, I wanna move us along faster, so. Next question, do we have any fighters? Number 3. What would it cost to fill back in University Ave, Embarcadero? We don't need to explore that. Okay, number 4. What is the official status of the Embarcadero or overpass rewording? The consultants have explained that the Embarcadero grade underpass is eligible for historic designation. What does that mean for changes made to it as proposed by the mitigations for the closure of Churchill? What does it mean if it was removed or if it needs to be rebuilt? So are you guys okay with having this be something that was written in there? I'm looking for written responses that we're gonna need to be able to put in an appendix. Does this work?
So, I'm sorry, Nadia, the first sentence there that says consultants have explained that it's eligible for historic designation, I'm not sure which consultant that is.
AECom.
I don't think they've said
Ed
that.
T. Mercurio told us twice now that it is not historic, but it is, that it's eligible for historic designation. That's what, you already have, there's actually a study, which I'll put into the repository, from the ARB and what have you,
okay.
back in the day. So it's eligible, but you'd have to go through the process of trying to make it historic.
Okay, news to me. So.
We don't know if it's eligible yet.
It is eligible.
I would say I concur with Tony. I'm not sure, but that's my understanding of it, is it's possibly eligible.
I will, yes, exactly. So clearly, we just answered ourselves, we need that answer.
So you have a document?
I'll send you the
If you send it
document.
to me, then we can
Yep.
confirm.
Yep,
Nadia?
And maybe answer the question even.
yeah.
Nadia,
Yes.
just process question here. Can you clarify how many, what time we've allotted for this activity?
We've allotted 40 minutes. I think it's gonna take us longer, but,
Because we have hundreds of questions, so if so, we're gonna
there's
have to go a lot faster.
if you look through, there's actually a lot of redlining and blue lining.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm being hopeful, but,
Okay.
try to read ahead, yeah. Sure, so we can go by page. You think that'll be faster? We can go by
Okay.
page.
This historical bridge is really bothering me because wasting so much time discussing this. Okay, so it's eligible or not eligible. So do we want to be historical or not? Like there is a limitation of being historical. We cannot, demolish it and et cetera. There's consequences. We don't talk about consequences because, whatever that historical, not historical, they might use it, for their benefit, whatever decision they make, right? So it's not very clear, like why we discussing it.
So I
and-
think the reason it's on there is because one of the mitigations is to expand the Alma Street
Right.
Road Bridge. And
Right.
if there's I don't know anything about historical, so now correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm gonna look at that. If there's something that prevents you from amending to the design that changes it from now looking historic, there could be limitations to that,
Well,
which
so
could
far it's not
potentially.
historical, then why do we want to be historical?
We don't, we're just asking the question if it is or it's not, because it's come up, and we need to have clarification on whether it is or it isn't. That's it.
Well, to me, if it hasn't, in order to, it's a possible historical means like, they want to be historical, that it could be historical. Is that true?
It sounds like we don't know the answer.
Yeah, we need the answer, and we need it in writing.
No,
That's-
but why do we want to know? That's what my
Because if it
question is.
prevents being able to mitigate, so if the road mitigation for a closure is that you have to expand the bridge and we can't touch the bridge, then they can't do that mitigation.
Okay,
That's
so
the question.
so this is the thing, in order to be historical, you have to follow the process that, it has to be historical. But if that didn't happen, it's not historical in my mind.
I just don't think anybody looked at it, is the point.
Why do we need, okay, anyway.
When they get to that level of design work, that could stop that mitigation. That's the point.
We should probably
Then find
operate
out,
as
find out
though
as
it's, yeah.
soon as possible, like why are we delaying it then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's what
We
we're
should
trying.
operate as what it is right now, but I think the point, let's move on.
Yeah, okay.
CEQA doesn't care if it's historical or not, it's whether it's potentially historical.
Exactly.
So-
Okay, so we'll do this, let's take a moment to read through the rest of page 1. If there's any question that someone feels like it needs to be eliminated, take a look. Just to be clear, so read over page 1. Is there any question that anyone thinks needs to be eliminated? We'll take a moment, and then otherwise I'll assume that we're keeping these. Who does that?
It's an action item to find out whether this is a historical or not historical.
By keeping this question in, we are asking staff to come back with us
Okay.
with an answer.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. So if you're okay with that, then that would be the point of
Okay,
keeping the
yeah,
question.
I just don't want it like every single meeting we
No,
discuss
no,
it.
this is
yeah.
the point, is that we've asked a lot of questions and we're trying to make sure we get answers. Yeah.
It feels like number 7 is duplicative.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we're saying, maybe it isn't, I don't know, but now we're saying, okay, what about old things?
Okay.
I don't know. If it's not duplicative, it expands our scope beyond.
I think
a lot
it
of
related more to if Tony's thing had survived, then that would have probably been more of a question. So I think it's fair if we feel like we don't need to get that answer. Okay, so I'm hearing no on 7. Does anybody object to that?
Well, maybe a more direct question is, what's the status of the seismic health of that bridge?
Okay.
because if, oh,
That's actually included in number 4.
okay, if it's on Caltrain's list,
Yeah.
then we have to be worried about them coming through and saying, oh, yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
that's getting, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got most of that covered in number 4, if everyone wants to, does everyone feel comfortable? And we can eliminate 7? Yes? Okay.
Where's the one with the seismic?
4, number 4, in the middle, please describe the process, how long it takes, sorry, before that. What does it mean if it needs to be removed or if it needs to be rebuilt for seismic or other reasons?
Well, this is the ramifications. I want to know, is it on Caltrain's list? That's a more direct question.
Okay, I think we can find that. We can ask Caltrain if not,
Yep.
if they can come back to us with their list. They do a list every year, that's my understanding. Yes, so, yeah, I think, I heard Phil say something about number 5.
Yeah, number 5 seems too much into engineering.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, gone. It's like, woo! Okay, so no 5, no 7. Anything else on this page?
I'm wondering about 11. I'm not sure, well, there's nothing in the works. We hear rumblings that somebody's trying to put something together, but, I mean, as of now, we're all town by town.
It's probably my question, but I don't think we're gonna get an answer, so I'm okay with not asking. Whereas number 12 was also my answer, and I had a question, and I actually do want an answer.
Okay, so 11, we can, is everyone okay removing 11?
I think at some point we need that.
So I will say, Greg, you're getting a partial answer. One of the documents that we had to delay, which will be put out for next week's agenda, is page 89 and 90, 89 through 96, I think it is, of the Caltrain organizational plan that describes the 2 ideas they have for an entity that would help deliver the 41 remaining grade steps as part of a larger capital
Yeah,
project.
because, you know, the person last week who said that all the options stink, not in the same words, was also the person who said basically, I think what she was saying was, why don't we go to Sacramento, tell them how much taxes we pay in Palo Alto and ask for more of it back? Which is a question that, you know, someone should ask. I don't know if it'll work, but we can ask.
So I do notice, yeah, so there's an answer to part of that in the document you'll get next week. So
Okay.
let me know if that doesn't do it, and then we can
I'm sorry,
figure out
is
what
that for
else.
11 or 12?
11.
Then we can get rid of 11.
Okay.
Would it make sense to ask staff whether they've discussed funding with our state lobbyist or whatever they're called?
Yeah. I think 12 I would very much like an answer to. I do not want to kill 12.
Yeah, okay.
Because I know there are programs for improving grade separation safety, and other parts of California have had grade separations and or safety improvements based on accidents.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Can I get a clarification about how much funding sources come into the work that this group is doing?
So we are not really discussing funding sources.
So why do we want to spend time on that? I mean, it's interesting,
think-
city council should ask it, but.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know, that is
It's in the criteria.
yeah.
Feasible
Oh, thank
funding
you.
sources, you know, like the criteria as passed by the city council,
So
ask us to take that into account.
one potential reason to include that, Carrie, might be if the XCAP wanted to make a recommendation, for example, gee, we really like the following, 3 options, and we really want to encourage the council to pursue funding, it would be nice if we could say, and by the way, we've got these buckets that we've identified, that things that your guys are not doing. Like, so for example, as a member of CARD, I've been advocating for years that when we had high-speed rail, we used to talk to our lobbyist actually monthly. We haven't, to my knowledge, been as active as we once were in terms of going to Sacramento, and part of that's because we haven't had a plan. But once we have a plan, that we could go say, well, there's this and there's that.
So to Megan's point, just to clarify, I took it in a much more broad sense than you are taking. And like, do we have to find funding for this?
No.
Okay. So
But I think we need to
generally it needs to be plausibly fundable, but not necessarily down to the funded part.
Right, and I think it's cool, and I think Larry was saying last week too, we can go to council and say, this is our preferred alternative, help us find a way to fund it. But I think how much it costs is absolutely part of what we have to discuss. And if something is gonna cost $2 billion and we only have 200 million from all possible funding sources, that's something we should know.
I totally agree with that. I'm looking at number 12, and that's
So,
specifically finding
Number 12,
safety-related money somewhere.
Honestly,
It just seems very specific.
there is Carrie, back when we did the cap, we actually had AECom had a consultant that did a financial presentation, and in there was a chart of all the available funding sources. I would not be surprised if we recycle that response and put it in here and then just include it in our appendices.
I don't know if it helps you save your time, but this is a yes or no answer, and the answer is yes, and we are pursuing them. So, you know, how that.
Okay, so then the
factors into
question
your
is, please tell us
decision-making.
what you're pursuing, I guess, would be the question.
All of the above.
Thank you.
And in fact, we'll be taking a group to DC next month, or actually it's in March.
Awesome.
So,
Great, thank you.
It just happened. We just got lobbying done.
You're flying economy, just to be clear.
I find it very frustrating.
Okay, so, okay,
I
are
would
we okay,
remove-
hold on, let me do one at a time. So are we okay, so are we okay then removing that question? Since the answer apparently will just be yes?
I would like
Sure,
to in the
then
record.
remove the question.
Okay, fine. We'll
Okay,
get
yeah,
in the
yeah,
record.
but we would like to actually know what the staff is pursuing in terms of pursuing funding
Okay,
from all
so is there, and if yes, please detail?
this. Yes, there we go. We
Okay.
could even change it to something like, please detail efforts staff is taking to
Yeah.
obtain funding for grade separation from all
Yeah,
available sources.
I'm being flippant, but really it's, we need this in writing for the eventual future people who read this, right?
I would suggest taking out the words federal, state, federal, or railroad funding.
Should be local?
No, it should be all funding. It could come from Google, right?
Okay. So what funding is available? I want to change that to funding.
Is there? Private and public, maybe. Or just take off the words state, federal, and railroad.
Tony, do you care that much, or can we leave it how it is?
we
And
can
we'll-
move on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Everybody gets okay. So that means we're keeping 2, 4, 6, 10, and 12. Going once? Okay, next. Whew.
My comment on 13
Yep,
is that it sort of sounds like we have the separate set of questions that are for Caltrain. Do we need this type of question in any other ones that are, there are a couple in here that specifically are like copies of the ones that are in the Caltrain list.
okay.
Do we want to keep that list separate or sort of roll those up into this list?
I think it would be helpful to hear, I'd rather have something in writing from both. So Sebastian may answer our questions, but we're not gonna have something in writing. The benefit of this is that they're gonna parrot probably what Sebastian says, but we have something in writing.
Okay.
Does that? Greg, you had something?
13 is another, maybe this question is not worded right, but the question what is the process for reclaiming land under a viaduct?
So I think
And is it even a possibility, knowing we're not gonna get a complete total yes or no?
so there's a difference. Reclaiming, I think, is the loaded word there, and I'm
Okay.
sure that if we got a response back, they would explain that. So the right-of-way will always belong to Caltrain. You can have an easement where they allow you to use, for example, like if you had a tunnel, you could probably have a surface easement.
Okay.
But from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that would be something that would be negotiated with Caltrain as part of whatever the whole thing would be. And so what I'm imagining here is that staff will respond back with a blurb that basically explains that it would be part of a process and it would need to be negotiated and it would have to be agreed to by Caltrain and the Joint Powers Board in the city and on
So
and on.
not no.
Yeah.
So we can just take the question off then.
No,
But I think it's good to have it in writing again for the
Okay.
future. Imagine that there's someone like you in 15 years who's going to pick up this report and read through it. That's what we're trying to build the record for. Right? So I'm okay keeping that one. Number 17,
Isn't that kind of moot in light of
Yes.
last night's council discussion?
I think it is. I think we can cut out 17.
I wanted to talk about 18 though.
Sure.
As a result of an experience that I had riding Caltrain, when a Samtrans bus hit a bridge, like there wasn't clearance for it, and it hit a bridge that Caltrain was going over. This was like 2 years ago or something, but it kind of made me think about that question and sort of whether there shouldn't be a broader question about who is responsible for the maintenance of any rail bridges? Maybe we already know, maybe like the Embarcadero and the other
So
underpasses, like the city is responsible,
that one
but
sounds.
that's not entirely clear to me.
So, would a future you need to know that to make a decision on rail? Or is that just like a wow, I'm super interested in because I was on a bus?
That's a wow, I'm super
Okay,
interested.
cool. So if we could, if we're okay leaving out our wow questions,
Sounds good.
because future you might not need it.
I will note that relates to the question of, is it 14.6 or 15.6 is a clearance under Caltrain overpass?
Yes, good question. Okay, so the other two I see here are, so number 22, I feel like is going to be answered as part of the normal course of descriptions of the projects. I think we can
I
take that
agree,
out.
we don't need a separate question for it.
Okay. And then will there be a public education campaign? I don't know if this is, so this is it would be good to know, but does our future self and anyone reading this report about why did we choose these things need to know this?
We're talking about increased service in 2022 and more likely 2023. If we talk to the PR manager, director, she'd probably say it's too early to plan that campaign now, but of course there'll be a campaign.
Right. So we're okay taking it out?
What?
Thank you, that was my question. I want to make sure it's on the table, that, especially as we're talking about the number, the frequency, and the speed. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So it's relevant to the number of trains, the increase, and the speed.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's about it's more, this is a safety thing about sort of making sure Palo Altans understand what's happening.
Absolutely.
But again, it's in the far future as far as we're concerned.
But as the article that Larry gave to us
Yeah, okay.
about the Bright Line.
And what I'm hearing is that it would be useful to record that as a yes, so if in 10 to 15 years when this is built, if it didn't, someone like Pat can come back and say, I had question number 23, because you will.
Because I constantly say it.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, I'm fine keeping it. Anybody? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, all right.
So,
Yep.
just to ask, are we, it's more of a requirement, right? Like, it's not a question. Like, we require this. I
We
know.
don't necessarily require a public education campaign to warn people that there's going to be more trains coming.
We don't?
No.
And that's what happened with the Bright Line.
Yeah.
They did not educate people. People actually tried to run across the tracks.
It would be super awesome
And
to
it
have
was,
a list
yeah,
of
and
requirements
the
like this.
trains
I
were
think
going
that's-
extremely fast, and they didn't anticipate it. There were unintentional injuries because people didn't understand how fast the trains were going. And then when they did have education, there were some incidents of people taking their lives as well.
Wow.
So it became a hot spot.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think it's an even better requirement.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so,
I have one other thing. I think we have not covered handicapped issues. 25% of our population is disabled, and we need to be able to sort of put that in the back of our minds when we're designing these things, and we can go beyond the code if we want to make things accessible.
okay. That sounds to me like if and when we're deliberating on things that we would like to recommend to council, that we want to be proactive, like the safety issue. We want to be really proactive to say exactly what you just said and make it clear that going above and beyond, whatever is just a minimum ADA requirement would be something that we would think would be a good idea, assuming everyone agrees. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that means we're keeping on this page 13 and 23. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next page. I'll give everyone a minute to read. Okay, so lots of viaduct, obviously, because it is a viaduct section, but things about noise.
Well, aside from noise, yeah. Are any of these questions that we're not gonna get as part of the regular process or don't already have?
I don't know that we would get number one. Ed, could you tell? I'm not really familiar, to be honest, how
I
this
think we
works.
have a diagram.
We have a diagram, but I don't know how it is relative to the trees. Like, I don't think we'd get. Yeah, I'm not, I didn't, it's not my questions. I'm not really clear. I don't know if anyone remembers that it's their question. Maybe you can clarify what you mean.
I asked this question and then Ed said that we can put the bougainvillea. I remember that, but,
He said what? I'm sorry, I didn't catch what
he
you said.
can put the bougainvillea because I argue there is no room to put any trees.
Oh, I see. It's just can you put a tree in the 2 feet or whatever, just between the fence? Well, it wasn't tree, it was landscaping. Yes, yeah.
Well, there are two viaduct proposals, so it's not clear also which one we're asking about.
Good point.
At the time in which you generated your list of questions, the main viaduct at that time was Meadow Charleston. That was being discussed. Some of these, you can argue, apply to both, and some may only apply to Meadow Charleston.
But I think her question was the Churchill one, since that was so close to the fence, she was worried about the space for the trees.
So I think from my perspective, even if the answer is we can't tell you yet, these are, to me, things that people keep asking. And so even if that's the official answer back, then I'm okay keeping at least number one and probably number two.
Yeah, I agree. I think that these are, in many ways, the kinds of, the type of information that needs to be provided for all of the options. So keeping them on as questions is fine.
I'd like to, are we keeping 16? I'd like to keep 16.
Oh, yeah, we're not that, I didn't go that far
okay.
down yet. Sorry, I'm saying we passed these out already.
Number 12 to me feels a little bit like less of a questioning kind of question. And more of a criticizing kind of question.
Number 12, the issue for number 12 with height has to do with the clearance below the viaduct for vehicles, and that's no different than if we had an underpass. That's the criterion, the Caltrain criterion to be the 14, 6, or 15.
Actually, it talks about,
Well, that's a different question.
so I would say that, again, I think it's a question that has come up in the community. I suspect that the answer is going to be that our zoning laws do not get to be applied to transportation infrastructure. But they need to say that officially, and that needs to be put in writing.
Yeah, but who's going to decide what harmonious means? This is where I think
I
community
think that-
feedback, in the eye of the beholder, is either harmonious or not. I don't think staff can decide that. No offense, Ed.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but don't we have code that talks a little bit about adjacency and things like that?
Yeah, I just don't know if that code is applicable. So I would like a responsibly, because I don't understand how code is applicable to public transit projects and, things that Caltrain has the right to
That's a
build in their
different
right of way.
question.
Okay.
Then this question is very poorly phrased if that's the information you want.
So do we want to change it to reflect what I just stated, which is, are there any minimum, maximum building height standards that, or other Palo Alto zoning codes that would influence any design? Does that sound like a better compromise?
I think that's your question.
That would apply to these transportation projects, not just any, just to be super specific. Right, yeah.
Yeah, you should have both sides.
And can they be overridden?
What applies and what doesn't apply.
Yep.
Or you can phrase questions like, what's a minimum requirement for the distance from viaduct to residential?
But you're more likely to get an answer back that says there is none. And so I
There
think
is
it's
none?
important to phrase it. Right, but I think it's important to phrase it in a way that the community understands what the goal of the question was, right? Because again, you're reading this in 15 years, why are people asking this question? So to the extent that we can, to really clarify what we're trying to get to the bottom of.
I guess this is a question for Carrie about the zoning, are the subjective harmonious environment. In the zoning, do they have phrases like that, or is there Is there aesthetic requirements in the zoning, or is it all just numbers?
I'm not sure, and
Okay.
it sounds like Tony has something to say.
Yep.
Zoning is not applicable to Caltrain, so why are we talking about zoning?
Because people will want to know.
So it's not,
It says everything conflicting, right? It says it's not applicable, and then you discuss it. If it's applicable, then you don't discuss it.
so the zoning code does not cover the railroad, but we have in the zoning code how buildings should relate to each other, how structures should relate to each other, and the main issue is the daylight plane. And the daylight plane is sort of sacred in the city about how far and how high buildings can go next to other buildings.
Okay, so how can we agree to phrase this question so that it can express to the reader in 10 or 15 years that the concern was, this doesn't seem to meet our building codes or what we would do, but we also doesn't seem like we have any control over it. Can someone please confirm? And we get a response back.
I'd like to add on that.
Turn your mic on.
If harmonious appearance is a concern, does that mean we have to run this through the architectural review board?
No, because, yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, my guess is that the answer is going to be, we can't decide this. Yeah, go ahead, Larry, and move your mic really close.
There's nothing unusual about having some other governmental entity building within the city limits of Palo Alto and not being subject to Palo Alto zoning codes. We start with the school district, for example. School district doesn't have any limitations. I know people sometimes are surprised to hear that. The school district, none of the school district buildings have ever come to the city of Palo Alto. They don't have to, and they don't. And of course, the same thing is true of the state of California, the federal government. We have this huge development within the city limits that we never, ever talk about, and it's the VA. City of Palo Alto's got nothing to say about it.
But this is a strange situation, because Caltrain's building it, but we're choosing it, or we're recommending. Yeah,
Well,
You are-
so,
we're gonna talk about that. You may argue that it shouldn't be the way I just described it,
Yeah.
but it is. So, and there's, and you're.
but,
No, we don't, there's no answer to that yet.
but if we're selecting it, and we know that the
we're-
what?
We're recommending it, and Caltrain has to agree to it. We are not necessarily selecting it. It's not like we come in
Okay.
and say, this is what we've selected,
But
now you do
we're
it.
recommending it. I'm just saying it'd be a little hypocritical that if we say the daylight plane is sacred and all private people have to follow it, but yet we're gonna recommend something to the council that violates that daylight plane. That seems,
No, we're not, because we're not coming close to the final drawings as to where you can compute the daylight plane.
Yes, we can. It's 20 feet above, right? And then,
Well, that's what you think right now, but anyway.
no, it's not what I'm thinking. It plans, it's there. It's 20 feet above, and then it's 40 feet wide,
Okay.
20 feet away, and then my backyard is 20 feet away. No,
We're
not
wasting
20
our
feet away.
time.
Yeah, okay.
We're wasting as you yourself said, we're not gonna get to apply the daylight plane. And-
That's what you
Well-
think, or that's what cities think.
Yeah, we had it
have any-
15.
That's what you think.
we don't
But-
have
So how about-
jurisdiction to apply it.
How about we ask the question like this, guys? Are PA zoning codes applicable to any of the alternatives? And then staff can respond yes or no, and then we have it in the record that it does not.
And we should call it the daylight plan if that's a specific.
I'm just gonna
So
say
that was
all
question 15
Palo
that
Alto.
was stricken.
Yeah.
Do we want to
Num-
bring it back?
This is number 12. This is number
Yeah,
12.
but daylight plane.
Okay, but I'm
each
saying,
individual, when we're deciding whether we want or not, we can take that as a discriminator. If this violates the zoning,
you could, but the terms of the way that we're asking the question so that it appears in the appendix, so that people understand. What I'm proposing is
Okay.
that, at least for number 12, instead of having number 12 the way it's written, to strike it and say, are Palo Alto zoning codes applicable to any of the alternatives? Is that okay?
I understand that, yes.
Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, that was for number 12. Now we can go to 16. I didn't get to 6.
Could we discuss 4 and 5 real quick?
Yeah.
They're just about viaduct drawings and stuff, and I'm trying to understand sort of what the goal of these were and whether we don't have those or whether we need an answer.
We don't need
about
these
them.
questions anymore. I think 5 was, I missed a meeting and I saw that we were considering the viaduct in the vicinity, and I think we now have whatever that was.
Right, so we can
have it,
remove
so we
5?
can remove 5.
Okay, great. And number 4, can we get the detailed drawings?
I would still like to get those drawings.
I think we decided at the last meeting we have these. It was just a matter of they were presented longer ago, correct, Chantal?
But these are detailed drawings of the proposed viaduct before anything has been done to actually do a construction project, so we should not pretend that that's what's actually gonna be built.
Agreed.
No, but we get an approximation.
idea.
Yeah, you get an idea, and a viaduct is only, you can't design it in many ways.
Okay, so I have, we're eliminating 5 and we're eliminating 12, and we're keeping 4, is that what I just understood? Sorry, yes, we changed 12 to be what I said.
Do we need to clarify what various points is in order for them to be able to answer, or what's the?
Sure, I don't know whose question it is, do we have specific?
I'm sorry, number 4. I don't know who asked this either.
So I think these questions come a lot from the Mariposa residents, because I talked to this weekend and same thing again, and then they wanted a picture from their backyard, the viaduct picture, and then they said, ACOM provided that looks exactly like the one in Meadow, doesn't consider the, you know, in the Churchill crossing, is about 40 foot, and the other guy have extra 40 foot, whatever, you know.
Okay,
So it looks different, but then when you ask, you give a two-dimensional, there is a fence, there is a train, right? This has to be like more three-dimensional view of it, right?
What I'm
So-
hearing you say, In Young, is that we need to have, there's a difference between the drawings that we've done of the viaduct in South Palo Alto versus what it looks like in the north.
Right.
And so we only had pictures of the backyard view for South Palo Alto, and the argument is that these are closer.
No,
And
they-
so to the extent that that may or may not look different on a 2D photograph, could we have it be like viaduct asterisk South Palo Alto and viaduct asterisk?
So I asked it, and ACOM provided, but they look exactly same as the South Palo Alto. They have it a little, that's why I didn't.
So it's already been provided, so
They're
can-
provided, but it's just same rendering.
Okay. Can we check on that?
Fences
and see
all
whether
look
it's
the
accurate?
same. The
Yes.
Yeah, the fencing is not standardized where the houses are, and yet the fences look very uniform in the drawings.
So I'm gonna insert the word, can we get detailed drawings of the finished viaduct at Churchill? And we can leave the question as is, so we can get a,
Yeah, so even if we get Churchill, like you'll get two-dimensional, you can't really see. You have a fence and you have a 20 feet, right? So
But it's-
I don't know.
yeah.
So
what kind of
comment on
drawings the
that, I
community
think,
wants.
in Young,
Yeah.
I asked number 22 on the next page,
Yeah.
which I think is what you're asking for.
Okay.
So, to me, as an engineer, when I look at 4, I see the word drawings, and I think engineering drawings, and I think 2D, right? I don't think of a rendering, which is the nice colored 3D, you know,
Okay.
thing, which is what I'm asking for, which I asked for in the next page, which we'll get to in a second.
Okay.
So, but then regarding 4, can 16 be folded into 4 if it is my definition of drawing? Because wouldn't you be able to tell, if you had detailed drawings, whether the structure, the height of the structure?
For 16, it's a slightly different purpose. I want to know if at any point it will exceed 50 feet. And I think that's different than what do the renderings look like in the backyard. I think they're both interesting.
No, we're saying the same thing. I want to keep 22, which is the renderings, but if we say 4 is an engineering drawing, that should give us the information of 50 feet, 20 feet, whatever, because it should have all those dimensions on it.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, you're proposing, Dave, that we cancel 4, keep 16, because that gives you the 50-foot question that Carrie's talking about, and then your 22 would cover In Young's point about we want renderings, not engineering drawings. Is that correct?
I actually was thinking that we would keep 4, but because someone had asked, because they wanted more detail on it.
Okay, so
I
I
think
would,
that's
I
still
would propose that for
important.
4, then we insert the word Churchill, because we need to be able to determine those drawings. But do you want to use the word drawings, or do you want to use renderings? Because what I'm
Well,
hearing,
there's another option for 22, which is more rendering based,
okay,
and 4 is engineering drawing.
okay, so we want both. So keep 4, add the word Churchill, and then,
Churchill. I would suggest that it's a typical viaduct, not specific to Churchill. It's just a typical viaduct.
well, I think the viaduct will always be typical. I think what she's asking is to see it. So your thing of various points north and south, and maybe you can help me here. I think various points north and south, it means rendering, not drawing, right?
Do we?
But to me,
do we
that-
mean
that-
Two-dimensional or three-dimensional? Two-dimensional. Well, how is that different from a drawing?
Well, to me, when whoever put this in here then added, as seen from various
I'm not
points.
trying to be facetious. there are plans and elevations, which is what AECom is in love with.
Oh, I was just laughing because I was also confused.
I think, so, okay, in my world, and the engineering ones, the drawings that you're talking about are the ones that are just stick drawings that have 5 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet. But this one merges two concepts. You have detailed drawings, which would be 5 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, but then seen from points north and south, which is actually of a rendering. And so if, no, I don't think this is your question. I think this was in Young's.
Can I just play channel AECom for a second?
Sure.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me explain why. If you said, I want a three-dimensional view from a perspective of somebody south of Churchill at ground level, I can understand that. But just to say, I want a rendering, what does that mean?
Okay.
I'm
So
again,
what's
I'm
the
trying to
word that
channel-
we're looking for?
We're trying
Help me
to
with the
say
words.
3D-dimensional perspective drawings,
Okay,
seen from different perspectives. And we can describe what those perspectives are.
okay.
Phil,
I
the
think it's
word
a
rendering
people
is
ultimately
used in the computer science world to create a picture using a
But-
3D model.
But we're talking to civil engineers, not computer science people.
But that's the software that's being
But
used,
that's
though.
what they use for their
Yeah.
animation videos. That's what he's
Okay,
asking
but
for.
can we, for laymen, can we say three-dimensional?
Why don't we say?
Yes, but you can't say drawing because that implies
All right.
someone actually created it with lines by
Okay, that's-
hand.
That's
yeah.
my ancient heritage, okay.
Yeah,
Can
you're too
Software
old now.
generated
I'm gonna let
drawing.
Greg
What?
take a stab at this.
I want to
Go
do,
ahead.
no, I don't want to help with this. I want to change the subject.
Okay, well, let me just get an answer on 4, 16, and whatever, and we'll move to change the subject. So, okay, so for 4, are we okay changing the word drawing to rendering?
I think we should keep that for 22 on the next
Okay.
page.
That's what
and
you want, okay.
just
So
leave
what do you
this one
recommend?
as-
Tell me what you recommend.
Just get rid of as seen from various points of north and south. Just say, like you were saying, at Churchill.
Okay, at Churchill, great.
And I think 16 could be folded into 4 and answered, yeah, you'll get the answer to 16 when you do 4.
Okay, all right, I'm
I'm
good with that.
happy to combine them, but I want the yes or no answer.
To which one?
I think it's fine.
16? That's fine. I'm happy keeping 16 because I think it's an important, it'll come up again and again. So we'll keep 16. So we're keeping 4 as modified by Dave, keeping 16. No, we're keeping 16 as its own. And then now we get to the next page. We're good to move on?
Actually, no, I'm not ready to move on.
Sorry, okay.
I think we can get rid of 8.
We can get
8 is,
rid of-
can we add more crossings between Meadow and Charleston? I can look at a map, and I can tell you that no, we cannot.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Or even bicycle paths, yeah.
But do they mean, I'm not sure if they mean roads or bike ped.
I asked the question and I wasn't clear. I kind of meant both,
Okay.
but certainly road, the answer is no.
So can we change it to say bike ped?
Not
Sure.
California Ave?
Wait,
Again?
wait.
No,
yeah,
between
what-
Meadow and between Meadow and Charleston, the
I think-
viaduct option at least begins its launch before Meadow, stays in the air between Meadow and Charleston.
between
and
Meadow
then-
and
Oh, I
Charleston.
read the
Number
implication
8.
was across all of Palo Alto.
Yeah, number 8 doesn't say anything about Meadow and Charleston.
No, yeah, it doesn't. It says Churchill.
I thought it implied across
We
all
can
of
ask for
Palo
Churchill
Alto.
too, but I think the answer is probably still no. I was trying to make it easier by saying the answer is going to be no.
Actually, it's possible you could reopen the former crossing at California Avenue if you have a viaduct.
We're,
But we're not
no
doing
one's
viaducts
proposing a
in that
viaduct there.
vicinity.
What kind of station there? Yeah.
Okay, hold on. In the viaduct option, can we add more crossings than just Churchill? If so, which ones? So, unless you're being specific that you're looking to add a bike ped crossing, for example, at Seal, which by the way is something that came up repeatedly last night by the council members, so we might want to even just
Maybe we
change
should
this.
just specifically ask about that then.
Yes, I would be in
Or
favor of that.
Margarita?
Not you mean Loma Verde? So Loma Verde is an alternative that the council is looking at as part of the NVCAP process, because it actually happens before the Meadow Charleston thing would go up or go down. So,
But isn't the viaduct option at Churchill, highest point is at Churchill, so therefore where the seal is, there is no enough clearance?
I'm not sure
to-
there is clearance at Seal.
There is
I
no
think
clearance.
you could potentially have a Homer Tunnel situation. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we should ask the
I-
question
I-
because I
I-
don't think we know, right? So are we okay then changing number 8 to reflect in the viaduct option, can we add more bike ped crossings at Seal?
Sure.
And then taking out if so, which ones? Okay. Okay. So that means we have, are we clear on this page? Do you have everything you need, Chantal, for this page? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, next page. Okay, Dave, so now we get to your number 22.
Can you, where he says renderings, can you say renderings and then put in parentheses 3D perspective?
Okay, perfect.
Then we have,
I like it.
everyone's happy then.
Okay. So
I guess for that specifically, it refers to Churchill Viaduct, so that
okay,
may
I think
need to
that
be
that's
added.
worth mentioning
Yeah.
because we already have a lot of graphics of the south, and I'm mindful that graphics cost money, so we need to think about that. But I also realize that we have not done. There isn't as much about the viaduct option at Churchill, in terms of that type of drawing. Okay, moving on to 23.
We should also apply to Elizabeth's ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Since we have a viable hybrid option now, should we bother answering this question?
I think the importance of this question relates to, are we inadvertently triggering induced demand once we separate? And so and the answer may be that none of this has been considered yet, but this is kind of like the placeholder for some of the safety things. It allows us to go back later and make sure that when they do come back in with more detailed drawings, if a hybrid were to be selected, that we make sure that this is what was looked at and we're at that level. Does that make sense?
I threw a question related to that in the traffic section later on, but I
Okay.
don't know if
So
that
does,
matters or not.
does 23 imply that, I guess if we're asking it as a question, the answer is probably no, but one of the discussions we've had in the past was, did we over-engineer the hybrid design in a way that would force us to exclude it? You know, that it was too wide and it had too many consequences for properties and things like that. Are we asking?
That was the underpass.
That was the underpass?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the hybrid. So this is the hybrid for Meadow and Charleston. The question relates to, how many lanes for stacking and turning and what are the traffic impacts of that? And I'm assuming the answer is going to be, no, we haven't done that, because I know we haven't done that.
Okay, so it's mainly about the flow
But again,
through.
this is kind of a future placeholder, like this will be something that will be discussed in 2 years if and when we choose a hybrid, and then you get more details. That's what that is. Okay, then we had, what are the visual impact difference between a hybrid and a viaduct?
I don't understand how that question can be answered by the staff.
Okay.
And I don't even remember sending that, even though my name is next to it.
Oh, okay.
So-
We have a
but I
road
think-
question. Chantal, do you have a question you want to tell us about?
No, some questions came up during your discussion at the last meeting.
Okay. Okay, we can take that out. 26, yep,
I think it would be answered. Yeah. It would be answered with some of the other stuff we're talking about.
okay. So 27 trench,
Very carefully is the answer.
how could a trench be widened to accommodate 4 tracks, and what is the impact of almond drain? So I think we can strike this question simply because, this is out of scope. If that has to be if that has to happen, then that is a discussion for later. And part of that is that, again, referring to documents you haven't seen yet, but you're getting for next week. Adina and I worked to include a letter which is, High-Speed Rail is doing their EIR for the peninsula about operating on the peninsula, and they have in there that they do not, that if they would require passing tracks, Caltrain basically said, if you need passing tracks, you're paying for them, and we're telling you now. So essentially, if that were to happen, that's who would deal with it, but it's so far out of scope for what we're doing that I would recommend that we take this out if everyone's okay with that. Yep, okay. All right, so we don't have any burning questions on the trench, is that accurate?
I feel like for the record, we should ask the question of, can we really build a trench through the 2 creeks? But I don't know how we would get an answer.
I would agree.
No, I think the question is that Ed brought up a long time ago, which is it a fatal flaw not to pump water? I mean, if it's a fatal flaw, we cannot do a trench.
Well, you can do a siphon. Theoretically, I mean.
Yeah, but
There'd
you
be
can do a
regulatory
siphon,
issues,
but-
but I think it'd be less regulatory issues with the siphon than with the pump.
last night, Roland talked about a meeting he was going to attend on February 11th regarding a trench. So I think it's
Oh.
in San Jose.
He
Is it at
actually
the-
said he was trying to get council to tell him whether his associates who will be coming into town on the 11th should focus on this, so
Did he say
it's
who
not a
was-
meeting.
Okay.
But he didn't say who those associates were.
He said that it's due to Bart. They're all coming in to meet, talk with Bart.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay. But, okay, so back to this, do we have any question about the trench that we feel at this time needs to be included?
I mean, I know Eddie's kind of answered it multiple times, but clarity on at what point they can switch to non-tieback sides of the trench.
That'll probably come up in engineering, in detailed engineering, but you
Okay.
want her to say that so that there's something here?
No, as long as these things are in the drawings for the public to see, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think they would be included. Keith?
Also of note, you have two questions related to the trench and the tunnel in your water sections that
Yes,
are
thank you.
forthcoming, so.
Yeah.
There's about 3 questions total.
The-
Is that Keith, and then you, Chris?
Talking about the tiebacks, can we have a question asking about the feasibility of using piles instead of tiebacks for the trench?
Sure. I think, Ed, isn't that something that when they go through further design, we would get an answer on? So probably the answer back will just be, we'll let you know later.
Except that there are several noise questions that relate to driving piles versus a board pile. Board pile is much less, is almost no noise.
But if you're talking about neighbors' impacts, having tiebacks that go in your backyard forever, you can't plant trees in your backyard.
Yeah, I have to say, it might affect our decision, as if we're, if there's a significant chance of property impacts versus no property impacts at all.
Okay.
I think that might affect our decision.
Can someone take a stab at formulating a question for us so that we can yea or nay something?
Is
and
it
add
possible
in?
to engineer the trench without tiebacks?
Okay.
At a reasonable cost.
And AECom will
That's
say
that's got a lot of loaded words.
that depends on soil conditions and the height of the trench wall.
Yeah, that's true.
And until they do the design, they won't know the answer.
Okay.
But let's ask a question so we get it on the record.
Okay,
Let's
so
ask the
what
question,
question?
but
Is
that's
it
what the
possible
answer's
to
gonna be.
engineer a trench without tiebacks?
Is it possible or maybe feasible?
Feasible at a reason, yeah, feasible is good, because, yeah, it's possible.
Okay, and if so, what is the impact on expense?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get that? Is it possible to engineer a trench without tiebacks?
Is it feasible?
Oh, sorry, is it feasible?
Feasible is difficult.
And at a reasonable cost?
I think feasible implies reasonable cost.
Yeah. Yes, if so, what's the impact on expense? Great.
And safety, right? You can do things that maybe would, I assume you're implying that it would be a reasonable cost and a reasonably
Yeah,
safe.
I mean, it has to be, physics has to matter. Yeah. Okay, so, for the South Palo Alto Tunnel, let's see, South Palo Alto Tunnel, given Caltrans is still developing standards for the tunnels. So this is my question. This relates to the fact that, there are different, standards that were being developed for Trans Bay, and I don't think that they've been finished yet, so I'd like to keep this question just because, again, posterity, we need to know in 15 years, like, have those assumptions changed? And because if it takes a while to build this and those numbers have changed, then we need to just have a
Because I was gonna say, we're no longer proposing a passenger-only tunnel, right, or an electric-only tunnel.
You are, in South Palo Alto, you have the, passenger only below and freight at the surface.
Oh, that still exists?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Now's a
Technically,
good
yes.
time to recap your 7 alternatives
Yeah.
on the table.
Okay.
And again, it may
Shows you
not-
what I think
it
of
may
that
not-
one, okay.
Yeah, exactly. You just showed us your Uno cards there a little bit. So yeah, my vote is to keep that simply because things may change, it may take a while to build these things, and those numbers may also impact things in the future, so if that's okay with everyone. Okay. I'm not, does anyone identify 34, and do we know?
Can I go back? Both for the trench and the tunnels, do we want some questions about groundwater impacts.
I think those might be in the water section.
Oh, there's, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah,
We've thought of all these things just in different orders.
number 34, aren't we, isn't that kind of the implicit in the?
Yeah, I
work
think
that-
we already got
Yeah,
cost
alright, yeah.
estimates. Okay, so remove 34.
I think we can reserve, we're gonna remove 36.
Yep, 36 is what we've been arguing or discussing
Maybe
before.
even 38.
Yep. Yes, can we get estimates of increase or decrease in train noise for each alternative? I definitely want to keep number 37. But I'm with you, I think 38 we can remove, right? What's the cost range of blowing out existing grade separations, especially in Embarcadero?
What does blowing out mean?
I don't know.
I assume it means widening the Embarcadero Bridge.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means.
That's, then let's say so.
Well, but as part of everything we're doing, we're getting cost estimates.
Yeah, no, I'm talking
I
about
think
38.
I left that one in and it was like, yeah, deleting, like removing the this was related to Tony's idea.
Okay, well, Tony's idea
Yeah,
didn't move
exactly.
forward,
It was
so
related, it was, I think I even put in parentheses, Chantal, only if council like includes
Okay,
Tony's
alright.
idea, should we still consider this?
But 15 years from now,
One of
nobody
them.
looking at this would understand that.
Right, so we should, everyone's okay cutting that out then? Yes? Okay. 38 is gone, okay.
And so is 34.
So is 34 and so is 36. Okay, I am feeling good. Good job, XCAP. Okay.
For page 5.
Yep.
We need to do this part. We already did the rest.
Right, okay, so page 5, we only have to do the top, that's good. So, yeah, then water. So, ongoing maintenance costs associated with each option, I'd like to keep that one, is that okay, for the record, again?
Can who pays be part of that question too?
Yes, and who is responsible? Yes. And we have, in the responses we got from last week, there was some information about, for example, the pumping under Oregon Expressway, which it turns out belongs to the county, and they did give us some numbers of how much that is. But that's just a small piece, I think, of what this question is encompassing. And I think do we want to describe what we mean by maintenance costs? Are we talking simply pumping? Are we talking about weed abatement and graffiti stuff and all of that stuff?
Well,
Or-
even what Megan asked, I mean, a train hits the hybrid option, a giant bus hits the hybrid option, a dump truck that didn't dump, which happened on Embarcadero, hits it, who pays to fix it? Does Palo Alto pay to fix it? Does Caltrain pay to fix it? Does the
Do
county
we
pay
need
to
that to
fix it?
be in the appendix for the future?
Well, that's like risk management.
Right, yeah, that's a Geico.
Okay, I'm fine then.
Okay, but does anyone feel strongly that we need to define maintenance costs, or we want to keep that broad? Okay. How about, do we want to, what are ongoing maintenance costs, please describe, so that we get like
Sure.
a listing of what that is, right?
That's such a broad term that if I was answering it, I would just give a minimal answer. I may not answer. So if there's something specific that you want, you should ask it specifically.
Okay. Anyone have anyone specific, or anything specific?
I mean, yeah, pumping, certainly.
Yep, pumping.
And another thing that I was thinking about is, maybe this is too far out and we shouldn't include it, but like in the case of a viaduct, isn't the amount of time that structure is reasonable before it needs to be replaced, like 40, 50 years or something like that? So do some of these options have sort of a different lifespan? Yeah. Maybe that's too far beyond like ongoing.
I
but
don't want to look it up in 50 years. I might be tired by then. I hear you. So I think there's a difference between maintenance and replacement costs, and I
Yeah.
think that gets us into a whole other category. And
Okay.
I would say that, again, part of this is, will the difference, if the maintenance cost on a viaduct is, 100 years and the hybrid is 95, is that going to be the compelling difference, even if it was 80? Do we really want a whole piece on that, or, I mean, it's a question. I'm fine if the answer is yes, but I'm just
I
trying
mean,
to.
that for me was really just related to measurable criteria.
Okay.
And like, how are we adding up the costs of these things
So,
in comparison to feasible funding sources?
okay, so, suggest a phrasing. My brain's getting.
Ongoing maintenance cost, including, I mean, we can just do including pumping. I don't know how other people feel about potential replacement costs. Like, maybe at this point, it's not worth considering.
It seems so far in the future that you
Yeah,
couldn't
I'm not-
predict
I'm not
future
worried.
dollars, you know,
Yeah.
calculating that.
Also, they're investing a lot longer. So the Golden Gate Bridge is now
Larry, come closer.
84 years old.
Got it. Are there any other ongoing costs that we know about right now that we should specifically include?
We don't, which is why I think we should ask.
Yes.
So, ongoing maintenance costs, including pumping and any other, or
Sure.
separate
Any
question, are there any other ongoing maintenance costs?
Right,
that-
pumping, et cetera. How about we just pump pumping,
Sure.
et cetera, in parentheses, yes? Okay. So Chantal, we're just amending pumping, et cetera, after the word maintenance costs. And who is responsible? Okay,
Ed is leaving in 10 minutes.
yep, okay.
Is there anything that we want to bounce off Ed before he leaves?
Well, let's get
Quick, get him.
I do want to come back because I have more to illuminate on this page. So.
Okay, so we'll come back to page 5, and we're jumping to page 8, water. For those of you who don't know, Ed used to run our utilities department, so that's also a section that you would want to hit him up on. Page 8.
I mean, I think we should ask some water questions. I'm not really enthusiastic about us getting actual answers. I mean, a trench is worse for the water than the other options.
Yeah, I asked Gary a bunch of questions about water.
Well, the thing he said was it might turn other parts of town into a floodplain, into a flood zone. That was the scary thing that he said. He said in his answer, you asked somebody, and one of the things he said was,
Oh, did I forward that on to you?
was
Okay.
by having a trench with siphons, there's a possibility that new flood zones might be created by the FEMA. That might have been a scare tactic, but he did say that.
Oh, I didn't.
I'll find your email.
Okay.
Suggest actually this topic. There are many people who will want to weigh in on this topic. Both the retired engineers. I think a number of them had expressed that opinions related to that, as well as Safe Palo Alto groundwater. So Keith Bennett, Rita Verhill, others involved. So I do wonder if you want to have either a XCAP discussion of that or a subgroup that invites folks who want to be involved in that discussion to contribute to your understanding of the implications of groundwater.
So, my thoughts on that were, because we're gonna start deliberating soon, if the group is really stuck on the issues of water in order to be able to identify things, then we could have them. If the group decided that, as at least one person has, that there are some options that should no longer be viable, we may not need to take that step.
Right.
So that's what I was trying to wait for. That was kind of the point of me putting out the feelers at the last meeting to see are there burning water questions that we need to have anybody come out for? So, I think when we begin deliberations, if that becomes clear, we'll probably have to include that in, but that may not be necessary.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, there's a different question about, are there things that we would like in writing in the record that we would like to ask folks? And keeping in mind that some of these questions may go to staff, but they may also get passed on to Santa Clara Water District or what have you. And again, do we feel like we have enough information with what has been given to us by the civil engineers that spoke and what have you, or do we want to add to those? And besides the stuff that AECom has already presented about creeks, so.
I think it's good enough for now, for me.
I'll find the email that is in my inbox somewhere with some of these answers, and I'll send it to Chantal, and that will give us
Well, we have to
refresh
make sure that
everyone's memory.
that was meant to be, like, do we need something in official letterhead, or is that, like, I think that there's,
This was a retired engineer kind of conversation.
yeah, exactly, so. But if we need to ask something official on the record that we want included, then that would be what we need. Okay. Yeah, did you need, okay. Okay, so we're okay, so how about, underwater, do we want to keep number 2? Or, let's do this, Ed has to go, so how about, is there any other questions for Ed, and then we can come back to these 3 questions?
Number 3, isn't that something that Ed would be knowledgeable about? Number 3 in the water, groundwater.
So actually, it may actually duplicate the other earlier questions of are there operating or maintenance expenses that should be considered, I think we could look at it broadly for every alternative.
Okay. I'm comfortable combining those if you want.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, everyone? Okay.
Yeah, so, under new traffic questions, which are number 10, or page 10, sorry.
There's more we have to go back for, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, just wondering how you, yeah. 10 through 11 through 12, wow. Boy, are these all,
Which page?
pages 10, 11, and 12?
Oh, 10 on.
So we are doing the traffic situation next, where we were supposed to kind of go through. There may be a lot of overlap. Nobody has seen these questions yet, so we threw them at Chantal, and Chantal kindly printed them today. But part of the fun sausage making is trying to make sure how many of us asked the same question worded 13 different ways.
Yeah, and let's see, you've got Gary coming back in 2 weeks, is it? So I wonder if you want to suspend discussion of those traffic questions until after that follow-up discussion to decide how many of these questions are still.
So I thought the
Relevant.
point of this section is a little different than the other one, which is this is to prepare Gary for the kinds of things that we're gonna need responses to, and I
Okay.
assume that he would do similar to what you guys did the last time, which is he prepared a presentation that attempted to respond to everything and see if we were still missing anything.
Exactly.
So not the same as the other ones where it's like, hey, this needs to go into the,
Documentation,
Uh-huh.
right,
I
okay.
mean, we may still need, my personal opinion is, I still think that those PowerPoints are gonna need some verbiage to eventually make it into an appendix, but, it doesn't, it's not like, this is not a, this needs to be
It's a little
responded to in
different
writing. Yeah.
situation.
Does that seem,
Understood, yep, I think that's fine.
is that helpful?
Okay, no, it's good.
Okay. Okay.
Right, so with that, so I'll excuse myself.
Great, okay. Okay, so back to page 5. Greg, you had a burning question.
Yeah, question 41 was my half-hearted attempt at the Dave Price solution. Now
Okay.
that we have doing that for real, you can get rid of it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, Chantal, we're
Question
removing
41.
41.
It's a long question suggesting doing something to Churchill that we don't need to do because we have another proposal. So, kill it.
Do we really need number 44? How much money do we save
I don't
on a
think so.
2% versus a 1% trench? No? Okay.
Well,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
there were
Phil.
2 parts to that. One is, the question I asked was the question of the vertical curve design. Remember that freight versus?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was capturing that question. And that's a design question. And also, it's, the other way to look at this is, are we having 1% grades on the trench or 2% grades? And those are issues that AECom has introduced.
So, do you feel like those are gonna be, the 1%, 2% questions are going to be answered as part of the presentation of the alternatives as they are? Is that sufficient? Or what is it, what more are you looking for that you need, that you want staff to write
Well,
out?
Is to explore the notion, and this may not have been my original question, but one thing, you remember a few weeks ago, I worked up this spreadsheet showing, for everybody, I worked up a spreadsheet showing how the vertical curve distances are made greater because of the Caltrain design criteria for freight trains, as opposed to slowing the freight trains down from 50 miles an hour design speed to 37 mile an hour design speed, in which case you can save a lot of construction costs. That was my question.
Okay, so that is probably not going to be a staff question. That is going to
No.
be a Caltrain question, because I suspect what they're gonna tell you back is per their operating agreement, the design standards come based out of what their operating agreement is,
With
but
UP.
Sebastian should answer that officially. So Chantal, could we just make that one of the ones that, so number 44 is really relating
Alright.
to, yeah, for the Caltrain.
No, I think the wording, maybe I'll send you, why don't I send you some wording?
Yeah.
By email.
Right, and what it really is he had done that spreadsheet, it shows that if you operate the trains more slowly, you can
Freight
have
trains.
greater curves. To what end is, like, is it possible for Caltrain to change those? for us to have greater design flexibility.
In particular, to avoid the creeks.
Yes,
I don't think the cost really would change that dramatically.
right, yeah, it's not about cost, it's more about design.
Okay, so this will get taken off this list and end up on the Caltrain.
I'll send you something tonight or tomorrow morning.
Cool.
Okay, so everyone okay with 46 and 47? I'm not sure I understand 47, Tony.
So 47 is sort of duplicate from our previous question on the viaduct, on dimensions. But what I'd really like to know is a 2D drawing showing what the heights of these different options are related to backyards, to the fences and backyards, in order to understand the earlier questions that came up related to daylight plane and so on.
So are they going to be answered sufficiently by by the other questions that we asked? Because I think, I mean, I would imagine the consultants are gonna say, we don't have, with this level of design, they do not have everyone's backyard fences plotted out to be able to give you an every 20-foot estimated cross-section.
Oh, I don't mean it every 20 feet. I mean, that's 1 inch equals 20 feet is a scale.
Right, but I'm saying they won't even have a scaled anything, because it's so back of the envelope that I don't know that at this level you'll have it, so, maybe we can phrase this to say something like, when they've done deeper design, that needs to be there, because they're not gonna have it for this, right? That's what Ed explained the last time, that the reason they can't do the splicing of the existing video is because it's not as precise as, does that?
Right, he cannot cut the video.
Right, because they don't have those numbers, and this is just kind of
He knows that it's gonna be 2 feet away from the corner property, which is very close to the right-of-way. The right-of-way is only 84 feet there.
I heard him say
so
2 feet from the the viaduct is 2 feet from the fence line in the air, is what he said.
in the
Air, not from the property itself. He's talking about from 2 feet from the fence line as a viaduct elevated, that's what I heard.
Yeah, and how high is that viaduct, is what I wanna know. What?
Whatever's
No,
in the
plus.
engineering drawing.
Yeah. But you really, I mean, having sat on the ARB, what we asked for is very not very detailed, but approximate at this stage, a drawing that shows how high the structure that you're proposing is compared with what's existing.
So do we think we've though covered this already in the other question that we asked? That's what I'm asking.
I think so, but yeah, I
Okay.
think we have.
All right, so we can take out then 47 then, okay.
I had a comment about 46.
Sure.
Based on, because we sort of asked a version of that question in this measurable criteria that we haven't gotten to yet responses. And I read through that since the last meeting, and what it seemed to me is that the answer from staff was basically you can choose. Either you're gonna have a longer duration and less delay, or a shorter duration and more delay. And so I don't know that like at this point we can know what the inconvenience costs are unless we sort of make decisions about which of those two directions we want to go.
So the inconvenience cost doesn't have to be accurate. It's like our cost estimate. It's some general estimate of the amount of time it'll take to construct and how many cars get delayed, or people.
So I'm comfortable keeping the question with the understanding that this is just this is something other people will ask, and it would be good to get an answer from staff in writing about what this is and what it can and cannot be at this point. I still
Okay.
think that that's
I mean,
worth
if
getting
what
in
you
writing.
want is like approximate number of cars delayed and length of delay, then that wasn't clear to me from the question.
You know, if we wanted to ask and we wanted to pay Gary Black, he probably could compute the total hours of motors delay time per year for any alternative. If we wanted to pay him for it, he can do that.
Right. Well, when we get to the traffic questions and whether or not, like, we can talk about those, because I think, so what I'm trying to think about, like, the reason I'm not, the last one, we were asking for very specific cross-sections. I don't know how many folks that's super important and it costs money. I mean, I think it's gonna be covered in the other questions that we asked. I think this one about time delay and inconvenience cost and how that can be enumerated, and a description of what that is and what it's not, and what we can get at this phase is probably useful to have in writing, just within an appendix.
Okay.
I thought Phil said that you don't do that anymore, that you tried before to try and estimate the value of lost time or something like that. Was that you saying
No, I
that?
think it was Ed.
No,
who
Was
said
that, okay.
Yeah, what Ed was talking about was there used to be a concept called the time value of money, meaning if we build a freeway and motorists spend less time commuting to work, at what assumed hourly wage rate are we saving them money?
And it was super.
That's an old concept, though.
I mean, I think it would be, instead of talking about cost, wouldn't it be cleaner just to say how many hours are affected? Or
Right, that's what I asked. I think it's just hours.
total time delays? Oh,
No, I don't have any trouble with the question, the first part of it. What are the total time delays during construction? I think it's just fine, and people, we ought to know it. But inconvenience cost, as Ed has pointed out in some detail, is no longer a concept that's being used in the field, and I think we're just encouraging people to make some computations that are just going to lead to frustration and not do anything for us.
So we should strike the inconvenience cost, but keep
Yeah.
the first part of the question?
It's just that some alternatives are going to be less costly, less time delayed on the alternative. The alternative has less time delay in it, and some alternatives
Right.
have more. And so we need to know which ones have more and less.
But
So
that's
we-
in the matrix already.
That's is answered by the first part of the question. What are
Yes.
the total time
No, I
delays?
agree, yeah.
So, you know.
You don't need
then-
the
then-
inconvenience cost.
Right, you need
You
the,
can, you can play with it however you want to.
Agree.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll strike the word inconvenience cost, but keep number 46. Okay, and then the next section we did as part of the traffic thing, so we can skip ahead. Now we're on page 8. So this is public safety, police, fire, means restriction. I'm fine keeping 7 and 8, because I think we need to get that on the record.
I wish Ed was here.
Eh.
Actually, Ed would be a good person to ask as far as who paid for the fencing. As I recall, it was a joint effort between Caltrain and Palo Alto, so.
Well, the good news is you'll get it on the record now.
Yes,
by getting
thank
this
you.
question in, yeah. Yeah, so PAUSD is just, yeah, we need a follow-up. So can you, Chantal, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about, we've been covering a lot of things, and I'm worried that we don't have their stuff in here, and I know they're talking to staff, but are there things, like, what's the feedback loop so that we can be understanding what PAUSD is saying?
Yeah, I will go through notes and see if there are any other questions that we've covered with them that can be on the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not just questions, but any feedback that we haven't gotten, so can we find a way to formalize that?
Yeah, and we also provide, yes, there's a couple different
Okay.
ways that we provide them with updates, and so we can just get an update to share with the XCAP. It's probably the easiest thing.
I mean, what would help me is Barbara Best and also the other engineer said that they were like pounding, we need Churchill open. And is that the official statement? I don't think that was official.
The board hasn't adopted anything, so
Okay.
official would be determined, I think.
So this is their chance if they want,
Right.
if they want to influence us, they should influence. If they don't want to make a statement, then we can ignore they apparently then don't care about it, and then we can make it up our decision ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a decision and have them come back to us and say, oh, why'd you do this?
Well, I think one way to think about it too, so the questions and the impacts that you guys are looking at is just trying to understand the impacts for the varying parties. So for example, Judy Kleinberg usually brings forward some of her understanding of the town and country impacts. So PAUSD has their different items that they've brought to us. And I think that's what you were hearing in the meeting when Ron Ellis was saying, we use this for buses, et cetera. And so sort of acknowledging that as a factor for you guys to think about and an impact, but I don't know that I would say that the staff there would be the ones that would weigh in and tell you, like, we want alternative X. I think that would be something that the school district would have to decide for themselves as their board. So I think for us, it's really factoring in the considerations of how they are impacted, just like you're factoring in the considerations of how's groundwater impacted and how are all these other pieces that you're looking at impacted. I would think of it as an impact more than as a statement of, we like alternative A over alternative B.
Yeah.
Because the latter ends up being, I think, more of the making a actual public statement about which alternative they prefer. And I doubt that you would get that as a staff impact shared, but the impacts of what each alternative would do for PAUSD, I do think you would get that from the staff.
Anyway, it would be good to have their thinking.
Yeah, I will follow up.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Larry?
I'd like to go back to number 7, just on the basis that there's too much detail in it compared to
Yes,
other.
I agree. If you want to, reduce it,
Yeah, well-
truncate it, it's fine, it's fine. Whatever you want to take out, Larry's fine. I just wanted it in there as far as a
Pat,
statement.
can we combine 7 and 8 to one question?
Sure.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much the same. I just 7 has a lot more detail.
Well, I think that this isn't the place for that type of detail.
So Larry, you might have missed the part where what we said was, because this is things that'll get answered in an appendix, we probably won't have this level of detail on the alternatives that we're deciding. But if someone in several years came back and read this and wanted to know what we asked, then they'd be able to go back and say, well,
Though I've been reading this, and I don't think we've really gotten into that level of detail on most of the other questions.
okay, so maybe strike 7 and keep 8. Is that still enough?
No, I was going the other way around. No, who will pay for safety initiatives? Period.
Okay. But I think Pat's point that you might have, I don't think you were here, she was saying that oftentimes many of the safety things are overlooked and not counted. And so what you and I might consider safety isn't what is considered safety by other folks. And so, for example, even with the things that happened previously, like Caltrain didn't add fencing on both sides, even though one would have assumed there's fencing on both sides. So it's trying to capture that spirit in something that may not be answered now, but at least it shows that we asked and that we were given an answer, that it's supposed to be looked at in the future, such that in the future, if someone picks up this document, they can go back and say, well, we talked about the fact that this
You
is
have
going
much
to
more
happen.
faith in appendices than I do.
You know what, in card, I live in the appendices and the footnotes. Everything interesting is always in the appendices and the footnotes, I will just say.
But Larry, this is relevant to your article.
No, it's not. It really isn't. Getting into that level of, no, the general question I'm fine with. The detail, I'm not fine with.
Right, and I agree. It's more detail than's needed, but I want that complete design to have as many aspects of safety reviewed, and again, in the planning, as well as if we need to evaluate, as in Brightline, this system did not work for the public safety issues, and so they had to go back, and I'd rather be proactive.
So am I hearing you say you'd be okay, Pat, with keeping number 7 with just who will pay for safety initiatives, question mark, striking the rest of it, and then keeping 8 as it is?
That's fine. That's fine. I just want there to be a statement about some specificity, because, as I said, when these incidents occurred in 2009 and 2014, we were not prepared.
So would it be helpful to include, because this could also be a question that we give to Caltrain, what are the standard safety measures that are being assumed on grade separation projects along the corridor? Is that?
Yes, that's a good question, and that's why I wanted Rob Scarpino to be here.
It's not only grade, it's also right-of-way.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so what right away and, okay, so we're striking the,
No, actually, I think it would be better if you phrase it the other way around. Somebody, maybe Phil just suggested, what safety measures are going to be included?
okay, great.
Put the burden on them to list all the things, rather than putting it on Pat or anybody else for us to say,
Right, because what if you missed one, Pat? Yeah.
I completely agree, but because like the way it's phrased is, they can't say no. Like we're not gonna have, of course, it's a requirement. So we want them to elaborate on what they're gonna do to meet that requirement, right?
Okay.
I think the question is, should we go beyond what the code is asking? Because we have to deal with
Well, I think we have
the code on safety.
we want to have them enumerate it, and then if later in our recommendations, we are like, that was not enough, we can say that, but that's a part 2.
Yeah.
So
But
I've just asked Chantal so the question will be what safety measures will be needed, and we're gonna keep it on this list, and we're also, because the city might have their thoughts, And then we're gonna also direct it towards the Caltrain list, because the Caltrain might have a canned response that they already give, if that's okay with everybody.
How about adding another clause that says, particularly those in excess of code?
Okay, great.
Is there building code on these issues? Yeah.
Wow, that's really high.
It's not that you cannot see, you can see, but it's.
Wow.
Oh, maybe I qualify as blind.
I usually think it's because my glasses are dirty. Okay.
Who knew?
Okay, so is, Pat, are you okay with then changing that for number 8 to say what safety measures will be included, particularly those in excess of code?
It's fine.
Okay, great.
A lot of
That wasn't
detail.
easier. Okay, so, the water creeks, we talked about PAUSD, so they'll come back. Water creeks? We're good. What does that mean?
Wait, I have problems with number 2. I don't understand what it means.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what we meant by number 2 either. Does anyone identify their question and you want to elaborate?
I didn't ask.
Carrie, I see you leaning.
It's not my question, but the whole seawater rise may affect how the water levels and water table and filling I think that it's related to all the other water things that are gonna happen in our area, right, with sea level rise. Is that?
So-
No, for the question to be meaningful, I think you have to say, what level of sea level rise?
Yeah, it's pretty abstract, but that was my read of what the question meant. If someone wants to be more clear.
Well, we're not proposing anything that's any close to sea level. This is the higher, Caltrain is in the higher part of town, so it would have to be, the whole town would have to be underwater. So it would be more about, are there gonna be more storm? That's probably out of our.
Okay, so remove number 2.
I would say that I was looking at the comprehensive plan, and South Palo Alto is actually closer to the bay than North Palo Alto, by the
Yes.
way. That they showed like a worst case, 20-something
100-year
flooding,
floodplain.
and it did actually extend all the way to Caltrain in the south.
Oh,
But,
did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen those too, like,
Okay.
yeah.
I think
Well,
where
so-
I live is in the flood zone.
How do we change this?
I live in
Because
a
this
flood
question
zone
is too
too, so-
broad. I mean, if they had to answer this, you'd,
I wasn't trying to bring back the question, just saying, letting you know that
I just want to
existed.
say that this would, what is the potential for flooding given climate change is a kind of a large, long response to what's supposed to be kind of maybe easier to read appendix. So is there a way to change this question? Like, for example, I had my thought was, are there any city policies related to climate change that might play into whether some of these alternatives have impacts to creeks that would be considered a fatal flaw? In other words, if the city had hey, because of climate change in 100 years, we've already made a rule that you can't touch creeks for more than 50 feet at a time because I'm making up a bad example. But if there's a policy that guides that we should know about.
Sure, I mean, we're pretty sure there isn't, but yeah.
Okay. By
I was thinking of more of a new question, more along the lines of finding some way to get on the record. Is there a possibility of new flooding or new flood zones created by any of these alternatives? Yeah, and
So,
is
but that
global
would-
warming part, regardless of global warming, honestly, yeah.
Do we have a climate change plan, and does that show anything?
Yeah.
But does it show anything like that? No.
Honestly, if the trench is underwater, we got bigger problems.
Right.
Okay, so.
Nobody living here.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yes, exactly. Then we really won't have a problem. Okay, I'm deleting number 2 then, unless we hear otherwise. Okay, for the groundwater issue, we've already covered this one. Number 3, we already covered previously, right? So we're taking that out. Okay, then page 9, we're keeping only question number 1. The property eminent domain questions are being rolled into the presentation that Norm Mattioni's given. Question is, how do we capture what Norm Mattioni says in a format that is usable for the appendix? Anybody have any thoughts for that? Chantal, could we do a transcript of a specific meeting if needed so that we have the best? because Norm Mattioni is not gonna write us a book report, right? And
I
okay,
think that YouTube has a automatic captions.
it's terrible.
Yeah, but yeah, there's options.
Yeah, I think from the city, Chantal's saying that they'll have to pay for it. The city has their own rules about using a specific transcription service, yada, yada, I think. No? Oh, I thought that's what you were indicating. Oh, okay, never mind. I take all of that back. I have just made up terrible news. But we can transcribe something so that we have at least Norm Mattioni's testimony. Okay. So we will do that, and I would,
Parks and Rec is automatically transcripted every verbatim word.
wow, the council doesn't get that anymore.
No.
Okay, well, so I would propose then, and I don't know if we have to take an official motion, or can we just note it, to do the same for the Sebastian Petty meeting next week.
Well, even more important. Well, because he's setting forth policy things, or giving us his interpretation of things that are unclear.
Right.
My guess that Mattioni could say, you don't need a transcript of mine, read this book.
Right, yeah, here's the code, page whatever. Yes, he did give us book suggestions, it was not pretty.
Could I talk about number one, the noise one?
Oh, yeah, please.
Just in relation again to like the questions that staff answered, which some of you don't have this handout yet, it's over there if you want it. It's in the next section, but they actually say, sorry,
No,
that, that we could conduct a, general assessment of noise and vibration based on the Federal Transit Administration's, FTA's Transit Noise Vibration Impact Assessment Manual. So do we want to add,
I would say
any more specifics to this question based on this answer,
So-
or?
that was,
This was staff.
staff answered that back, so I would say, do we feel like we need to have this, okay, let me start differently. Chantal, do you have any sense of what the implications are if XCAP were to take a position of, well, we really need to know the general noise and vibration analysis in order to be able to make a decision? How long does that take? What does it cost? What's the turnaround time?
I don't know the cost or the turnaround time, but I think last time Ed was here, maybe our last meeting or the one before, he was mentioning that we did want to get some kind of noise analysis related to the alternative. So we'll talk to AECom and figure out what they can provide,
Okay.
and then we can follow up. I think that's the best next step for us.
Noise
right now.
is a frequent comment I
Yes.
see in public comment
Exactly.
sections and articles and things. So the more we can be specific about it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Mr. Shikata was acknowledging, was we need something related to that. So we just need to find out what is realistic at this time.
And,
Okay,
and
then I'm fine with question one if that's the current question one.
Philip? Oh, turn your mic on.
Oh, sorry, I could be entirely wrong, but I thought what we had discussed is potentially just saying this might be louder than this.
I guess, so,
idea of the FTA sounds official.
yes, it does sound.
Vibration impact assessment manual.
So what I would propose for this group is, the point of this is to get these questions rolling so that staff can work on those. It is completely possible that as we get into deliberations, there is some new thing that we decide that we need an answer to. And so this isn't the be-all, end-all, but it is an attempt to kind of give staff a running start so they can get going on getting us some answers and we can keep going on our work. So if we get a response back from AECom that the noise thing is just higher or lower, then we might come back and say, well, that's not enough, or that's all we're gonna get, and we want you to write that in the record, or if we were to ask for this very official study, it costs this much and we have to go to council.
I should point out that the fact sheet actually has more about noise than I remembered. It says something like, for the trench, noise may be projected in the following way, and this could be mitigated.
Okay.
So there actually is like 3 or 4 sentences about noise in the fact sheet we already have from AECom. So it's not like we know nothing.
Okay.
But given the amount of interest in the topic, if there is some FTA manual that doesn't cost $100,000 to implement, that might be useful.
I'm just thinking maybe a useful question would be to request that AECom or staff give us a link to something that describes what what types of mitigations are available for noise. Not that they're necessarily going to be used, so that people understand that when we get to that point eventually, there are things we can do about it. We just don't know what they are now because we don't know what the designs are. So it shows that we're proactively going to, they're gonna think about that stuff. We can't get to it yet, but there are things they can do to mitigate certain types of noise. Does that? So maybe the question could be, is there a list or a link of ways to mitigate sound for general information or something like that?
I think if you go to get an acoustic engineer for some cost, you're going to get answers to all of these questions in general, not specific, but they'll give you the decibel levels at different places removed from the noise source.
So I'm pretty sure there's just a link on, I don't even think it might even be on the CARD website from 10 years ago. There's a link to all the different ways that noise can be done. So I'm just looking for them to give us a link, so if someone wanted to read more about it, they have that, versus hiring an acoustic engineer, because I'm trying to save us money. Is it okay with everyone that we'd have a link to something that provides additional data?
I just did a very quick search, and I found something published.
Microphone. Sorry.
Just did a very quick search. I found something published by the Transportation Research Board. Report 155, Track Design Handbook for Light Rail Transit, second edition. So, no, but it's transit, not just light rail, but talks about ballasted track, embedded track, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Well,
is
do
just
we want to hold and
super
wait till
quick.
we get more back, and then we can come back to this and see what else we need? Does that work? Okay.
The one thing I would want to point out, especially with Caltrain running diesel, we need it for both electric and diesel.
Okay.
And also, when the noise engineer came for the last meeting, they said, oh, there will be a barrier high up on the track, so.
A sound wall.
Yeah, sound wall. So, there are a lot of different variations, so, like, how are you gonna analyze this I think it has to be somebody who's a specialist, right? Otherwise.
And I think that was some of the idea of the comparison, or sort of, it'll be high level at this time, because you won't be able to say exactly what it is. It depends on what type of wall you use, how high the wall is, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's even the bouncing sound type of thing, that the sound may not happen to the immediate neighborhood, but could bounce somewhere else. So it's, we'll see just what level of detail that we can get at this time, and let you guys know.
There's also a question of, yes, Caltrain will run a diesel fleet for some time, and then eventually they plan on having all electric trains. Question about whether our grade steps are built before or after that switchover happens, right? Because we may not need to ask about diesel questions on a viaduct if they've already switched to all electric by then.
We still have the 3 freight trains a day.
Yes.
I also think that's a good baseline, to understand what the current noise is, as you're trying to sell that as a potential public.
So current
understanding
noise
of the impact.
is actually captured in the comp plan. There's actually a noise contours map that shows what the decibel levels are. So, and it shows exactly where the corridors are, and then what it was going to be in 2030, and how those are expected to increase. And so, question would be then, once we get the noise information back, how do those alternatives measure against the noise contours map that we have that exists? So, okay, so we're just gonna have the one noise question for now, and then we'll wait till we get more. Okay. Eminent domain we're doing with Norm, and then the next section is, new section. So these are questions that what are these questions? Let's see.
The first two for Caltrain and miscellaneous are questions that were offered when you guys were deleting questions. So people offered me deletions and offered me additions. So the top 5 in the Caltrain and miscellaneous sections are those. And then the next section of new traffic questions goes on for about 2 pages total, 2.5.
That's actually the next item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just put them all.
So let's look at the Caltrain and the 2 Caltrain questions, and then the miscellaneous questions, and then we'll stop for a second because we have to take public comment, and then we'll do the traffic thing next because it's actually the next item. I'm recognizing we're probably not going to get through the entire list of traffic questions, but we can have a broad traffic discussion about what our questions are.
we already discussed number 2 already when we had the early
Yeah,
discussion. of
Pat, is your
safety.
number, yeah, that one,
It is again.
okay, so we, great, we'll remove number.
And that's a truncated version.
Yep.
Didn't we already have a Stanford question too? Oh, page 1,
We
6.
had one version of that, but this is, I think, this is specifically asking Caltrain whether they're talked about Stanford in their business plan, which is different than what we asked to the city. So Tony, I'm gonna push you on these cost estimate numbers. I know why you're asking and I get it, but the question is, you're not gonna, I don't think it's going to be useful to have a section of the appendix that goes into why public sector costs are higher than private sector costs.
No, you can remove that.
Okay, thank you. So that's taking out number 2, and then what about number 1?
You know, I would still like to go forward and understand what's in these construction details that make the construction costs high. And I have several friends in the construction industry that I'd like to pass this by and find out what their real costs are. So I can do that on my own. It
Okay,
doesn't have
so
to be
can we
ex-cap.
tweak, so I think the second part of the question that says, so can we get normal costs? I don't know what you mean by normal costs. I'm not an accounting person, so. maybe
Well,
I
if
missed-
let's say a teapot costs $8 in the market, it should cost $8 for the public sector, and the private sector, it shouldn't cost 25 or some exaggerated number for two sectors.
So that
right?
leads into your number 2 question, which we agreed to eliminate. So are you okay striking the second part of that? And then if you wanna know what are the typical construction details for various components, I think what you're asking is there more detailed, line item numbers available for the existing alternatives that, like that right now we have kind of roll-up numbers of the costs? Are there more, specific numbers that are available that give greater detail?
Well, AECOM has provided a very detailed cost breakdown. It's just really high, and so I want to find out why. And I can do that on my own.
Okay, so
I
you're
can
okay
go-
removing that
yeah,
question then?
yeah.
Okay. And number 1 and number 2 are gone under miscellaneous. Okay, number 3.
Okay, number 3, I'm most interested in Alma being reduced to 1 lane each direction.
Okay. So this actually seems like it's a traffic question?
Yes.
Okay, so can we move that to, number 3 moves to traffic. Okay. And is everyone okay with me stopping there and taking any public comment there might be on this item? Okay. Okay, yep. So we're taking public comment now on number 5, which is the XCAP list of questions.
Okay, yeah, under traffic, so I'm just looking at number 15.
Oh, you know, we're gonna do traffic in the next
Oh,
section,
oh,
so you can,
after it?
if it's about traffic, you can hold it for the next section, because that's where that is. This is just on the. Yeah, these are the questions that we've done so far. Go ahead, you've got 2 minutes.
I have a question, or trying to figure out, there are a number of questions that are in public safety relating more to the, what I call public safety, which is fire trucks, ambulances, things like that. And they were all eliminated. Is that information coming from someplace else, or do you already have it?
Yeah, it's available in a report that was given to XCAP already, and it's on the website. Thank you.
And that's available?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to quickly suggest, there was a question as to whether or not you could eliminate the tiebacks on the trench. And I'm just wondering, casually, if it's maybe a good idea to consider compression members across the top taking place of the tiebacks.
I'm sorry, we didn't hear you. Could we consider?
Compression members across the top. That's, of course, an engineering question, but of course, so is the question of eliminating tiebacks generally.
Okay.
So-
I think we assumed
Greg, mic.
they'd be replaced with something.
Greg, microphone?
Yeah, and it seems like the most efficient
We assume
way
they'd
might
be
be
replaced with
compression
something.
members across the top to take the.
Not a structural engineer, but I assume they're not going to propose us a trench that will collapse. So is there a different way to keep it from collapsing? Right, yeah,
They will
I think
definitely
that's the
not
question,
be,
yeah.
just to be clear. Okay. Yes, so, so before we move on, we need to officially adopt the list of questions as we've just agreed to this evening. So Larry, do you want to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, great. Perfect. I just thought you were gonna come out with some big eloquent statement, so I'll make the motion, then Larry, you can second if you're okay with it. So I move that we take the questions as that we just went through and adopt those as the official ones that we have so far. Okay, Phil, you can be my second. All in favor? Aye. Any noes? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Okay, great, that passes. Okay, so now we can move on to the traffic piece. Well done, guys. We got through a lot of pages. So the caveat on the traffic thing is because we have had such quick turnaround on meetings, there might be like multiple questions that are duplicated. And so maybe as we go through these, if you recognize that the question being discussed was also asked by you in some form, it would be good if we could identify those questions and kind of try to mold, squish them down into just one question. So, this will take some interaction, but I'm sensitive to, we may not get through all of these, and we will have to bring this back to the next meeting for sure, in time for when Gary Black is coming on February 5th. But actually, hold on a second. These were really gonna be, guiding questions for Gary, like we don't actually need written responses back. So do we want to, I think instead, why don't we discuss whatever anybody is thinking about in terms of traffic? So Greg, I'm thinking of you specifically. At one point you were saying you wanted to model more trains, and we had a discussion about that, and you were telling me whatever I wanted, and I wasn't really clear on. So let's have that conversation and what else we might need.
Actually, in general, I'm a little contrarian, and I'm not. I think we have to start, just like for other things, imagining a world in which we don't get the answer to every single question we have about traffic. And I think there's a segment of the public that's not going to believe anything the traffic consultant tells them anyway. So I think we need to be a little careful about asking 50 more questions about traffic and expecting that that's going to answer everything. At the same time, I did want to know what the impact would be of more Caltrains, and I lost track of the number, but now that we know the number for 2037, or 2027.
2027.
But I don't think you should spend a lot of time on that.
Okay.
But I mean, if it means that, it used to be you waited three light cycles at Churchill and now you wait 12, then that would be important to know.
That 8 trains an hour is news to us.
Yeah.
And yet, when you think that the delays are nonlinear with increasing
Exactly,
train frequency.
exactly.
That may be something that we should ask Gary to rerun his model.
Right. Well, that's what I was originally asking when I talked to Nadia after the meeting.
Right, okay.
And that was my only question on traffic.
So, maybe, I have no idea how expensive it is to rerun models, but maybe one of the questions for staff would be, he ran it for, I believe, 6 trains an hour in each direction, total of 12. Do we need like a sliding chart, at 6 to 12 trains an hour, at 16 trains an hour? I don't know what is more efficient, but we certainly now know, at least officially from the Caltrain thing, that they're looking at 16. And
I
what
would
does that
say,
do?
particularly since in 2027, we'll be lucky if we have started construction, let alone finished construction. So we ought to be clear that we can anticipate some pretty rough going for a while, and go into this with our eyes wide open. And there might also be an argument for doing something, as opposed to people are going to say, I don't think we need to do anything.
It'd almost be like that, you take the unclearable cues presentation and the graphic that he drew with all the cues there, and fill in between today and the future, because he only had 2 points there. He had was it green and red or whatever it was, but you could kind of graph like the slow growth to a point where you would think it would be unbearable. And switching that last part now to 8 instead of 8 per direction instead of whatever it was, a 6 or 7.
Okay.
I mean, he already modeled Churchill for, I think, if
Was it
nothing
5 or 6 or
happens
something, or
and then
7?
20, whatever, projected increase in traffic. I think we're just asking him to model that one more time.
Okay.
And we don't know if that's type a new number into the computer and press the enter key, or if it actually is an expensive process.
Chantal, I'm sorry, Ed's not here, but do you have any sense? Or Philip, actually, do you have any sense? Like, is that,
I think it's not quite so simple.
put your mic.
Sorry, it's not quite so simple as they just enter the number of trains into the system and it
Great,
computes.
okay, good to know. but do you have any sense of whether that takes way more time or a lot more money or not as much money or,
That I'm not sure.
okay.
I think we need to do it because it's the most accurate data there is, and we cannot be modeling it on some other fairy tale number when the number is 16.
Okay, so, I'm gonna just, as a note, overall comment is that now that there's updated information, we need to update the traffic numbers, at least to be relevant to that. I also, my personal concern was that, this assumption basically takes today's traffic conditions and looks at when the peak hour is, and then tries to model those peak hours. But it doesn't actually consider that in the future, Caltrain is actually not just looking at adding more trains, but running a robust schedule all day. And so my question was, for example, right now, lunchtime is not a peak hour as compared to maybe rush hour, but if suddenly at lunchtime you now also ran 16 trains, did we just create a new peak hour? And does that create some kind of network effect that we're not capturing because we've just focused on exactly what today's peak hour and looked at the future?
I think that would be fun to understand, but I think we're getting into we're not going to be able to know everything.
Well, so the only reason I bring it up is because to the point of, how do we get people to understand that this is not just, it's coming and it's gonna have a huge impact. I think people are misunderstanding. This is not just like what is the burning problem at peak hour. This is going to be an all-day thing because of the new schedule that Caltrain is proposing, and how do we capture that?
Yeah, but the traffic happening in Palo Alto and all of these, Embarcadero and Churchill is all peak hours. The rest of hours, I don't think there was traffic issue, wasn't there?
Not today, but the question is, if in the future you start to stop the train all the time, all day, do new peak hours get created that we don't know about? So for right now, rush hour for lunch, like all the folks who go to Town and Country at lunchtime in our neck of the woods, isn't enough to be the same as rush hour, but is sort of a peak hour for Palo Alto, right? Like I know not to take, certain streets and whatever. But in the future, if you now ran 16 trains between, 11:30 and 12:30, how do I get to Town and Country?
I've been going with the plan that we don't need to think about that.
Yeah.
Because sort of related to question number 8, which was mine, which is, can we simulate beyond 2030, which some people in the public have asked about? That wouldn't happen. They wouldn't run all-day trains, as far as we know, until after 2030. And so,
I don't know. I'm not sure. So there's a difference between running, I don't know I guess the question for Sebastian is going to help drive some of the traffic questions, because I don't
Okay.
know when they're running more daytime trains. So,
Off-peak trains.
off-peak trains, yes. Sorry, I
So-
shouldn't call them daytime.
Okay.
But I would not assume they're gonna run 8 trains at lunchtime if they're running 8 trains during the commute time.
That is what the Caltrain business plan says. So the entire change, I'll get to you in a second, Carrie. The entire change that's happening with Caltrain is that currently they run more like a commuter rail service.
Right.
And they are changing their service model to be more like BART, which does run trains all
Regularly?
day, regularly. So actually, that's the significant, so
I
most
see.
people are looking at the business plan and are very focused on just, we've added this many trains, and they're really missing the other huge portion, which is you will now have that schedule all day. And so what I'm proposing is, and to Megan's point, you may not be able to model this, but it will fundamentally change how we get around the city and frankly, how we use transit. As an example, if I wanted to meet someone for lunch in Burlingame now, there's one train an hour, I'm much more likely to drive. But if I had a train every 15 minutes from Cal Ave, which is what the business plan is looking at, I might actually take the train from my house, go down to Burlingame, have lunch, and come back, because I know I can make it back every 15 minutes, something I cannot do today. And so they're changing their model partly to get people out of their cars, so you may have less traffic, and that part of the big traffic push is trying to get people to use the transit more, but it will fundamentally change how many trains are running and what that does to the network.
So just to challenge the necessity of this through the lens of grade separation, if we're committed to doing grade separations, how important is that information to making our decision?
Good point. I don't think it is for us necessarily, because this group has bought into the fact that we need them. I think it is making the case for the public, and again, thinking about what is necessary to show unclearable cues, and, right, so.
David and I are fighting over here.
Just to comment on that, I think that potentially speed of construction might be a factor then if this stuff is coming sooner than we thought it would be. So that may affect our decision.
If you listen to the council members, there is some interest of, at least on Churchill, kind of slow rolling the solution.
Yes,
And so then they may want to know, well, how quickly do we have to do it? Can we wait 10 years and then do Churchill? And if it falls apart after 5 years, then we have their answer that they have to get going.
I have sort of a process question since we only have 15 minutes.
Yes.
Some of these questions, there are some of them that are like straight up questions for Gary that he can like clearly answer maybe with his knowledge in the existing models, but some of them that sort of imply like additional work that we would like him to do. So my proposal would be to sort of like think about what additional work we want him to do, because Dave has some questions about it, like Elizabeth's plan, and you had some stuff about bike and ped, Nadia, and so that's what I wanted to discuss, was whether there's like concrete pieces of additional work we wanted him to do beyond this 16 trains per hour.
And just for clarification and thought, we will be doing a traffic analysis as part of the engineering, et cetera, that's necessary for the 2 new ideas that council pushed forward yesterday. So as our conversation with AECom rolls out for us trying to figure out scope and time and budget and all of that, traffic analysis on those 2 ideas would be included. So you can put it in here, but we're gonna do it anyway.
So question, the new alternatives would now have new data, which is the 8 trains per hour per direction, whereas the other traffic data would have been 6. So we'll need to understand whether that's going to be updated anyway. Okay. Right, but even if it's a Churchill one, they'll have different assumptions, right? So, okay.
A clarification, as I understand, this is from 10 years ago, that any train service can increase their capacity as they need and don't need any local approvals. So they can go from 16 to 24 trains an hour, right? I mean,
Subject to rolling stock.
yeah, right, so.
Okay, so, it sounds like maybe the best thing to do would be what kind of Megan is suggesting, which is I think is we'll have to read through and see what the questions are and which questions might require more work, and then maybe we can take a position next time on whether we wanna take a formal position on requesting certain work.
Is this something where we should all email Chantal with lists of questions to be deleted, and then she can consolidate as a way of speeding up this
Sure, I
process?
think that'd be great.
More homework.
I have an alternate proposal.
Sure.
Would you guys be comfortable with the traffic subgroup going through these questions and then coming back with, here's, like what the work Chantal just did?
So that would be super helpful, just because I have to say, my only hesitation, what Phil said, was, what if Keith and I wrote similar questions, and Keith says, you know what, I'll just cancel mine, Nadia captured it, and I said, you know what, Keith can't, and then we cancel each other out, and then we missed the question.
was willing to spend more time on these questions.
Right, and so, I guess the question to the traffic group, because we do have a time crunch, is, does the traffic group, and Megan, it's you and whom else?
Well, right now it's me, Tony, Adina, and Judy, and we haven't, like I said, we have not met or sort of
Right.
discussed anything further than what this whole group has been discussing. So with only, Tony and I'm happy to be with you and discuss this. I don't know the opinions of the other 2 people in the group.
Okay.
Maybe we should select a chair and say one of you guys should.
Doesn't need to be super official, but how about we do this less officially? We broke down into groups, 2 of those group members are not here. Is there anybody who has time between now and next week to be able to work with Megan and Tony to pare this list down, see what the repeats are, and go through it? And I'm looking more at the Churchill-focused neighbors, because there's probably more questions that you guys understand more.
And it would need to be probably Monday, Tuesday, maybe Tuesday, realistically. The time crunch on this one is A, compiling it so that I can bring it to your next meeting, but then B, I need to get these to Gary, and so that he can read them and figure out what his game plan is. We have him slated for February 13th for coming to the XCAP. And if you're asking for actual analysis, I'm being realistic on timing, that's very, very tight. So I would need it very early next week.
Could they do it in a Google Doc or something, as long as it's less than half of the people that are diving in?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. I can get that started and sort of pull out of here the things that I think might require work, and which ones are straight up questions.
Okay, great. So I saw In Young, your hand went up that you can help, so that's In Young, Tony, and Megan, and then she'll check with Adina and Judy.
And we already have an electronic version of this, so you don't have to retype everything up, right? Okay.
Great, okay, cool. Okay, we've got less than 10 minutes left, so I just wanna, is there any, we had one public comment. Does she still have, yes? Oh, okay, great.
Can I make one comment about the traffic?
Yeah.
Dave has a question here, which I'd like, doing Mike Price's idea with and without the mitigations. In general, it really complicates because we have, do nothing, we have Price's idea, we have closure, but then you say do all of them with and without. But that would be the ideal situation, is that because it's independent decisions, how much do each one rely on the mitigation? I don't know, it'd be really nice to know how expensive that would be to do every iteration of those.
Is it necessary?
Well, I guess one of the questions would be, do we want to do the mitigations? And if we know we want to do it, then we don't, then it is unnecessary.
And I want to be clear, this is part of probably why Keith is pushing on this, is that there were several council members that were talking about the potential phasing of a closure of Churchill and how that might work, and that they'd be interested in understanding more about that. And so to your point, having that data would pretty much be required in order for them to even have that conversation, if that's what they were looking to do.
And they might want to say, we slow roll Churchill, but we do the mitigations right away.
And having that data gives us the opportunity to decide whether there's pros or cons to slow rolling any of this, and whether phasing is a problem, right?
Just as a final comment, I just think, I've heard from a lot of the residents around that keeping Churchill open could mean that nothing happens at Embarcadero. And I think we need to prove to ourselves whether Embarcadero is needed or not. And it's the only way we can do it is to do some kind of modeling.
Okay.
And the other thing that David mentioned.
Microphone.
The other thing that he mentioned was the fact that traffic on Alma, and they're worried about induced demand. And I don't know, how accurately can they calculate induced demand?
Yep.
That would be a question for Gary, just generally.
That's a good general question.
Can you use your mic? Sorry, Greg.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a good general question for Harry.
Okay.
Can you repeat it?
Induced demand.
Yeah,
Traffic flows like water. If you open it up a hole, water's gonna go down that hole.
Is there,
But can you model that?
yeah, how accurate, or,
can induced demand be estimated,
yeah,
right, for the alternatives? Right.
exactly.
Are we done? No.
No, we have to take public comment, and then, I don't know if Chantal has any 2 minutes, so I will open it up for public comment. If you could line up, you each get 2 minutes.
Just following up on those most recent comments, I've never worked with a traffic model, but most models work when the inputs mean something. And with traffic models, you have humans involved making decisions, and they're all looking at their apps and deciding which way they're gonna go. So just be a little careful when you come back with these, the traffic consultants come back with the predictions, because people make independent decisions as they go along.
This was under number 16 about the crashes on Churchill. So I made a public records request, but it costs, I think, $100. So I'm hoping that you guys can get the information just on Churchill. I'm pretty sure she said 209 accidents. And then I also think for the accident data, you should look at each crossing, because a lot of cars have turned right onto the railroad tracks, which is a different type of accident. And then I also want to mention Churchill on the east side where we live, between Alma and Emerson. There are a lot of crashes. There are a lot of like fender benders, people backing up. I mean, I've seen them. I saw Tom Dubose, our city council person, when I was just taking a shot, and I saw an accident of a Castellea family crashing into a van that was backing out. So all those driveways on Churchill on the right side there's a lot of accidents. And so I don't know if they're going to show up in the accident data. And, because there's less than $500, or some of them are, and kids getting hit, and they just pick up and just keep going, or they get back on their bike. There's a lot. So I hope you can get the records from 2000 to 2019. And I don't really want to pay for that. So if you can get that, that'd be great. And also the numbers of students bicycling to and from Pali, they have some kind of data. I don't think it was every year from 2000. I have some stuff before 2000, like 1999. But if you can get cumulative, every yearly data, so you can compare the increase in bicycle and pedestrian, especially back and forth on Churchill to Pali and back.
Traffic accident data is available. University of Berkeley has a website where you can query this stuff, but it may only be things that are reported to the police. So, but there is a lot of good data there.
We don't have a way of tracking things not reported. It's not reported.
Clearly, yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, I had two questions I thought would be good to ask the traffic consultants. One, on the Churchill closure proposal, the mitigation that the traffic consultants had suggested had the traffic going along Kingsley with a left-hand turn light at Embarcadero. And my question there is that the traffic report indicates that the traffic currently backs up on Alma about 3 blocks waiting to turn across Churchill. That piece of roadway on Kingsley is actually less than a full block. And so I'm wondering how the traffic that's going to go and turn left could fit and what the impact might be on backing up traffic on Alma, et cetera. So that's one question. The other question is, I guess the traffic consultants are going to do some study, presumably, of the price proposal based on last night. And there are a number of comments, including by members of this committee, suggesting that they thought the price proposal would increase traffic on Churchill west of the tracks. And I don't understand why that would be, and I guess that would be a good question to ask the traffic consultants is, would the price proposal in some way increase the amount of traffic on Churchill west of the tracks? Thank you.
Tom, I actually asked that exact question about the queuing on Kingsley in mine. And Megan, the inducement question is basically that same question that came up last night. And I'm not a traffic engineer, as you know. I think the reason for the inducement is because you no longer wait for the train tracks. Even though there'd be a light, you now have a potentially faster way to go through than you do today. And so the question of inducement comes from that. That would be what I understood. Okay, so with that.
Nadia, I have
yeah.
a question. So if, because there was no train, and then, there will be more traffic, but there's a traffic light, so can you manipulate the flow?
No idea. I was just trying to explain why
yeah,
potentially
yeah,
inducement.
because,
but yes, that would be the question.
Yeah, so the traffic engineer often, temper or, managed traffic, right? With the traffic
Philip
lights.
Philip has a button in his house.
Right, manageable. Okay, anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to move on from that one. We'll wait for the group to come back with our updated things, and we'll agendize this for after the Caltrain meeting or discussion next week. Yes.
So I have a proposal. So yesterday, council members said, reduce some alternatives in each options, right? And I was thinking the similar thing. And just for our exercise, if I create some sort of poll, just check, if I give a number to each, if it's a seven different alternatives, if I give you number 7, you have to allocate into different options. Would you guys like to do this exercise? I'm just kind of curious.
Throwing it out there. Okay, so let's talk offline about that because we may end up using something, but that's not agendized for now, so we can't really discuss it now. So, but I'd love to talk about that because it'd have to be in a meeting, yes, and it couldn't be offline.
Right,
and so,
right.
But it's sort of similar to Ed's idea of could we get a sense of where it's going?
Yeah, we could have a sheets of paper and you
I
write
hear
it down, and then we can just add them up.
Yep.
And then the reason I propose is because, if we all think of some options are like 0 or 1, then means we don't have to spend so much time on questions regarding that options or something like this, right?
Mhm.
So we just
Okay. Larry, did you want to say something? You got to get near your mic.
I have my light on. Well, no, I do, but I don't think it's right. I think that we have to agendize that.
Yes.
And so we shouldn't have any discussion before having it on the agenda.
Yes. Yes, sorry. I thought that's what I said, but yes, what he said in a much better way. Okay, we're going to move on to staff updates. Chantal, do you have anything for us? Great, we're adjourned.
Oh, 6:59.